Hey, all right, it's time for the country.
We're here. Here's Lucas Nicolettos. Welcome to the show. How you doing, sir? We just
Um,
started recording right away because we were having a great conversation about men and women and how crazy all of them are. So I figured we should get started. So welcome, Luke. How are
it's fun. Thank you for having me. Welcome to the audience too.
you?
I am good. We were just talking, like you said, about men and women. We're going to hopefully talk a little bit about
Yeah,
politics and life and fatherhood, and who knows, right? We're going to let this go wherever it wants to go. So,
that's right. That's right. So, yeah. So you were just saying, say it again. I forgot. What?
yeah, yeah. Where did we leave off? It was basically about how women
Oh, how
have.
women can't get sold this bill of goods that they can do everything. They can be the CEO of the big corporation. They can have 3 kids and be a successful mom. They can, choose a wonderful mate and have a wonderful relationship with them. And it just seems like a bag of tricks. Like, no, show me a person that's doing all of that well at the same
Or better
time.
yet, show me the majority is. There might be
Yeah.
this sliver of population that can do that. But the
Hmm.
reality is there just isn't. And I feel like when you have those lofty expectations and you don't meet them, and we all know what happens when you have too high of expectations,
Yeah.
you start to feel bad, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about how the feminism movement, while it's been a great thing for women for equality and better better equalized pay and all those things that we traditionally have seen women in a specific role back in the 60s, they're at a primal level, though, to your point, women have a role to fulfill in this in the human nature world to procreate, to help us do that. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean they can't have those other things. It doesn't have to be an either or. It just says the part that I was most concerned about for women is when they choose one or the other and not both. But and when you try to have all those things and what the real problem or the real what we're finding is the all of a sudden you hit record and all of a sudden now I lose my words, that the depression and the real thing that women look for at the end of it is partnership, family, love, those things that are primal level, not all the surface level stuff about more money or the jobs or the esteem or all that stuff. It's and then when you really break it down is we're not trying to hold women back. I don't know of a single man who sits there and says, no, 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 I don't want women to succeed. I want to pay them like I have 2 candidates here. I'm going to definitely pay her 25% less. Like that doesn't exist. It's the same with the racism thing. No, I don't know. That doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist, but of every company I've worked for, and I've been working for 30 years, I've never once sat there and said, man, I've got 2 candidates here. How can I save money? I'm going to choose the non-white guy, right? Or
Yeah.
the non-white or the white woman, because not only can I pay her 25%, but she's a woman, so I can treat her poorly. Like it doesn't exist. And
Mhm.
if it does, it's so small that we shouldn't be talking about it as if it's this blatant systemic thing, right?
Yeah.
There are cultures, there are clubs within in companies that exist because of personalities. I got caught against that, right? In my last company, I wasn't a part of the what you call the fraternity of people that are up at the top, right? And if you don't
Yeah.
conform to what they do, then usually you're on your way out, right? But it has nothing to do with my race or my gender.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things to unpack there,
Yeah,
but
there's so much.
100%. The last thing you said, right? Like you said, I've worked in corporate America for 30 years, and part of what I'm doing now is because sort of a rejection of all of that, right? And a lot of it's about me, right? Like, don't get me wrong. There's a number of wonderful corporations, and I've worked for a lot of them, but there are negatives, and one of them is just what you were talking about. It's like high school, kind of, right? It's like who likes you and who's friends with who, and you notice, like, I see these folks that are now SVPs and EVPs and even approaching the C level that I used to work with, and when I think about it, yeah, they're great people. I mean, they're professional and they're good at what they do, but they're not much better than anybody else around them.
Mhm.
It's that they've built the relationships with the CEOs and leaders and have figured out how to sort of play the game to get there.
Mhm.
And it's an interest, but you can't like throw the baby out with the bathwater either, right? Like it kind of goes with what you were saying about women too, right? Like we spent hundreds of thousands of years building a society that can that can withstand a whole lot of pressures. I mean, up until 1800, the average person lived on less than $1 a day in today's dollars.
Yeah.
You imagine what you would do if you just had $1 today to eat, to live, to whatever, right? That has been the world for just about as long as we can remember. And so we've built these huge structures of things that look, they got problems, right? Like you said, men beating women has been a problem for tens of thousands of years. Like, and nobody says that's a good thing. But just sort of the structures and the things that we've built over the years is the man goes out and hunts and gathers and or provides in some way, and the women, stay home and nurture kids and bear kids and those sorts of things. Like all of that is a system that we built for survival, right? And a lot of it's biological as well. But when you just say, oh well, there's this problem with it that men are too dominant to women, let's throw the whole damn thing out. It's like Nietzsche said, right? God is
It
dead,
create.
and yeah, God is dead and we have killed him. And like he warned of what would happen in the 20th century after we just get rid of all that stuff. And that's where you get things like Nazis taking over and communists taking over, because there's all of the structures that we build into society we just sort of threw out. And so yeah, I mean, there's problems with any system, and that's why you need reform and change and things to say, wait a minute, that's wrong, we shouldn't be doing that anymore. But
Yeah.
when you go too fast and you just destroy everything and just rip it out, it
In
creates
a
more
period of
problems.
yeah, in a very short period, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and by the way, and this is the thing that always frustrates me, right? Is because we try to see beyond. There are the injustices of the world that happen, and we're not saying they don't exist, right? But to say that they're systemic, I think, is an overblown on the other side, right? And that we
Yeah.
have to knee jerk our way back. And then my only point has been, and this is where I go with, is I say, if you ask most women, mothers, if they would give up their job or their child, which would they do?
Yeah.
They're always going to tell you they'll give up. I'm going to guess that 95% of them will give up their job, right?
Yeah.
Because of the fulfillment and what they experience as a mother, right? And what we've experienced as a father. And by the way, we didn't even bear the children, but yet, but yet when that child is born, man, your life changes, right? And to have this, and I don't know if men have the innate sense of being a father like women do being a mother because of genetics and
It's different.
biology.
It's
It's
different.
totally different, and I'll never know that.
Hmm.
But could you imagine the pressure? And this is where we kind of led off with, of going, of wanting to be behind a movement that equalizes your gender, right? And which I don't know if anybody is ever saying that anybody ever thinks women are not equal, right? But that tries to that sells this path towards you can have it all, like we were talking about, and then to say, but you have to give something up. And
Hmm.
what most women have given up is the family life. And now what you're saying is, and now later on in their years, and the reason why the depression rate
Right.
amongst women is so high is because they're now realize that it wasn't worth it. Like,
Hmm.
and what you said earlier, it's like women will look for a man of position who can take care of them. That's the natural order. That's a natural balance. I'm not saying it has to be all in, but there is a balance. And it's 95% of the women who look for that and 5% that don't. And you ask any woman, there's no way they're going to sit there and say, yeah, I want the guy who's working at McDonald's over the CEO. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work. And there's a reason for that.
And those are the choices, right? Like, and in my personal life, in my own life, I've just made this choice too, right? Like, I spent 30 years working my tail off to provide for my family, and rightfully so, right? Like, I don't regret any of it. But, my son is now 19, he's in college, and I got to the point where, I was waking up in the morning like, I fucking hate this. I would dread the day. And what am I doing this for? And, like I wasn't even good at it anymore. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
of this thing going on in my head. And, thank God for my wife who understands. And we talked about it for months and months. And finally, I was just like, I'm out. I don't care. And if that means, we don't, go to Hawaii next year, so be it, man. There's more important things than these things these little trinkets they throw in front of you to chase,
So
and
yeah, yeah. So I'm
and
gonna
you
tell
get
you
caught up in this trap of like being a consumer, right? Like, hey, you got to get more money so you can buy that cool thing that guy has. And don't you want a bigger house? And don't you want a Mercedes? And don't you want to, fly to Bora Bora? And like some of that's cool. Experiences are cool. Don't get me wrong. But the things and the stuff and I'm the CEO of, Fortune 500 company A, like to me, it's not worth a whole lot at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people get there and they're like, is this it? This is what I worked my ass off for? And it's funny. I've been watching Martin Scorsese did a documentary on George Harrison. George Harrison's one of the coolest cats that ever lived, man. And and he's like, what happened is we got all that money that people work all their lives for so young. I mean, I was 21, man, and I had millions of dollars. And we quickly figured out it's not worth it. This is what we were all working for, and who cares? And so he started going on these other journeys of spiritualism and meditation and the Hare Krishna stuff and all these things, that had nothing to do with money. And I think we all get caught up in that trap. And it certainly if you look at the usage of SSRIs, it ain't working.
No, no.
You know what I mean?
Could you imagine now? I'm just going to put myself in somewhat of like a woman's shoes. Like, imagine you now have this option, right? Whereas men, we traditionally don't. We say we're going to sacrifice. We're going to be, think of I think of like the traveling salesman, the guy who's got to go everywhere, be away from his family, and he does all this to support his family. He hates his job, like he's got to put up with all this stuff, and
Death of
it's
a
like
salesman, man. Death of a salesman.
death of a
Go back
salesman,
and
death
watch
of a
that
salesman.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Uh-huh.
like all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? And here for a woman who actually has options, right? Like she has the option to have a child, or maybe not, right? And when women now have to put themselves in the breadwinner position, they don't get that option anymore, right?
Hmm.
Because they don't potentially have a partner who can actually take care of them for when they want to take care of their family. And that kind of pressure, to me, it's a lot. We have a pressure that says, yeah, okay, we're gonna have a job that we hate, but we do it for our family. For a woman to be, I have to do this for my family and I have to be the mother, and it's my instincts to be a mother and stay home and take care of the
It's too
children.
hard.
Boy, it's way too hard.
I could
It's
never
way
do
too
that
hard.
shit, dude. I don't know how
No,
anybody does that shit.
no. And you know what?
I worked with some righteous women that were doing that, and I could never understand how they fucking did it. Like,
they,
I'm just a dumbass man. I could never put that all together, dude.
and they are amazing for it. Those are amazing women who can do it.
Yeah,
But you also know, at least the ones that I've ever known have that edge, right?
yeah,
They have this edge to them that they has to keep pushing, and I appreciate it. I get it, but it's like I just sometimes wish women would take that step back and be like, it's okay. You're not failing in life if you become a mother and marry and have a partner, and that you have this wonderful relationship. There's nothing wrong with that,
yeah.
right? And it doesn't mean you've been disrespected. It doesn't mean you can't accomplish what you want. It just means that your role is important in the society to raise children. Which,
Hmm.
and there's nothing, I don't know, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, there's nothing wrong for a woman to be in a job and have the man do that, as long as there's somebody there, right? That's the important thing. And relationships
Yeah,
are hard. They are. I've got to learn that, like, especially after you have kids, man. Holy crap.
yeah.
Everything changes when you have kids, but
That's what people don't like. I've been married for over 20 years, and it's work, man. Like, if you just
it's
think
work.
you're gonna lay back and everything's gonna be perfect, and no, man. I mean, love is a verb, and all those cliches are true. Like you got to work at it, and you got to want to invest time and effort into it in order for it to work. And so many people just like, yeah, fuck it. And look, I don't want to judge people because there's bad situations out there for everyone, including women. Like you and I are mostly talking about middle class, upper class women. The poor in this country, it's a whole different story for sure. And I was thinking about that as you were talking about it too. It's like, and this is kind of cliche, but it's kind of true. If you go back to like pre feminist movement, pre 60s, and even into our parents' age, you could pretty much, like, a man could get a middle class job working at a factory or something like that, like the proverbial, GM manufacturing guy, right? Look, works for the UAW and all that. And you could have a house, you could have kids, you weren't rich, but you could do everything you wanted to do as a family, the sort of American middle class dream. I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think, I mean, the median income now is like 67 grand, it's super low.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think if you made that amount of money, you could buy a house today or have.
They said you heard that statistic right the other day. 99% of all the counties in the United States are unaffordable to the average person.
Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
Bidenomics. We'll get to
Yeah.
that in a minute.
That's Bidenomics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, inflation's insane. The amount of money, the money,
The pressure for the dual income family is more than it ever has been.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, we talk about it all the time. Like, I don't make I make a decent amount of money, and I would feel like we were poor and I would never retire. And I have a decent job. I'm manager of business intelligence and analytics, right? I have a higher education job. It's definitely upper middle class. And it's like, I feel like I'm lower class, right? Yeah. And
hard,
it shouldn't
dude.
be that way. It shouldn't be that way.
I quote this over and over, and this is a couple of months old now, but it was like the average American pays $700 more per month for regular goods and services than they did just 2 years ago. $700. That's like $8,000 a year.
Right. In 2 years.
Yeah.
In 2 years. That's how fast it's all deteriorated.
Yeah. And then you watch it happen, right? Like, we just had another $2 trillion deficit year. Right.
That's what, yeah.
So, like, we don't have that money. We got to print it. And, you have this amount of goods and services and more money in the economy. It's going to keep going.
So I'm going to pivot for a minute, because we got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is McCarthy and Gates. And we know you and I talked a little bit on the thing, and he mentioned all this stuff. And I'm conflicted in the fact that Gates did it when he did, but I love why he did it. Right. Because it's like a splintering a party when there's a real opportunity for them to take back. And I think that they're going to. Unless the Democrats somehow change their ways, which I don't think they're going to. I think they're so set in this socialistic, path that they're going down, this socialism path they're going down. But Gates, man, he just, every word. I don't know if you listened to. I don't know if you saw
his speech is in Congress,
in the congressional hearing, and the two sides, right?
Yeah,
and he was the only one from the other side. Everything out of that man's mouth, I was like, he and Vivek, those two guys have exactly explained my positions on just about everything that I want to see that this country goes to from a policy standpoint.
I've been following this pretty close. It's funny. Matt Gaetz is actually the representative. We used to live in that district in Florida years ago. It was Joe Scarborough was the representative there. Mm-hmm. There was a guy named Jeff Miller, and then it's been Matt for 8 or 10 years, I think. But it's a very rural Republican district. It's up in Pensacola, Eglin Air Force Base, Destin, all that area.
Okay.
He can do whatever the hell he wants. He's going to get reelected.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you have to know, right? Like, it's plus 20 R's in his district.
Yeah. So probably now plus, I got to be honest, it's got to be plus 40 now.
Plus 40, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
What he said was so inspirational.
But that enables a lot of things. Like, it's interesting. You watch that sort of level of the game where, like, if I'm a Republican in a Democratic district, a district that Biden won, I'd never say any of that stuff. You can't. You're not going to get elected again. Which bothers me on some level that, and I was making this point as this was happening. It's like, well, we might not get reelected, basically, is what they're saying if we get rid of McCarthy. It's like, so what, dude? Why are you there? Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, because everybody's up in arms, like a bunch of school marms. Oh my God, they got rid of the speaker, chaos, all these things. Like, who cares, man? What is Kevin McCarthy headed for Mount Rushmore or something? Is he like the indispensable man for Congress? He's a fucking lobbyist. He's paid and bought and paid for by the lobbyists there. And the reason he likes the continuing resolutions and the omnibus packages is because none of the people that are representatives in Congress get to have any input in what goes into those things. When it gets to the last minute and they have to do a continuing resolution, guess who picks all the stuff that goes into it? The speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what he puts in there? The stuff that the lobbyists want. And I'm not just saying that about McCarthy. It's true of every leader in Congress.
Every single one.
Every time.
Every
the
one.
omnibus packages and the continuing resolutions, they're a farce, they're a gimmick, and it's a way that we just all lose. That's right. So that's why Matt Gaetz, I love what he did.
I love it.
I did a lot of research on this. They have not passed there's 12 departments. They're supposed to pass 12 appropriations bills every year.
Yep.
They have not passed one single appropriations bill for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
That's since 2019.
It's so sick.
And that's when Nancy Pelosi
they haven't balanced the budget since Clinton.
Since the 90s. Yeah. And in fact, they've only passed every appropriations bill. Nikki Haley has this stat. By October 1st, which is the deadline, that's when the fiscal year starts, 4 times in the last 40 years. They don't even do their damn job. So for me, like, hey, Speaker McCarthy ain't working. Get out of here. Next guy up. Doesn't get it done. Get out of here. Next guy up. And that's what I love about what happened is, and maybe it was unfair and the whole like one person can bring the motion to vacate, whatever, dude. At least somebody's being held accountable for something in Washington. Maybe for the first time ever. You know what I mean? Like, other than getting voted out, it never happens. You know?
I agree.
I did a big rant on this. I'm like, who's been held accountable for the financial crisis of the 07 and 08? One fucking banker went to jail in the United States. That's it. And a guy you never heard of from a company you never heard of. Yeah. Who's been held accountable for the FDA saying OxyContin is not addictive?
Yeah.
Telling every doctor it's not addictive. Right. It started the opioid crisis.
Right.
And the guy that did that got a job at the pharmaceutical company right after that.
That's right. Yeah. Because he just made them millions of dollars.
Yeah. Who's been held accountable for, starting gain-of-function research for bat viruses, funding it, allowing it to escape from the lab, and then covering up those two facts.
He's never going to get.
Who's been held accountable for the CDC not telling people the risks of the COVID vaccinations, like myocarditis in young men?
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with all this. Who's been held accountable for Vioxx? I was watching RFK the other day. They knew Vioxx would cause cancer. Do you remember Vioxx? It was like for headaches and shit in the 80s. They gave it to people. They approved it. They knew it was a risk for a heart attack. And something like 200,000 people died of heart attack taking Vioxx. Nobody did anything.
Nobody. Yeah, nothing ever happened.
Yeah, nothing happened. So
and by the way,
finally somebody's being held accountable for something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's like, to me, it's about accountability everywhere, though.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see it. It starts at our government, and then all of a sudden we say, when it gets down into the people, right? And this is where I really do think that the U.S. is going to lose in the long run if we don't start holding people accountable for their own lives. What was it? They go, we can't have a government shutdown because this is the game, right? They wait until the last minute. We can't have a government shutdown because think of all the people that lose those benefits. Oh my God, that means they're going to have to be responsible for their own lives, right? And I'm not saying that people don't deserve help, right? But they can't be dependent on it and stay dependent on it. I forget who it was that said it was that welfare was the system that married black women to the government rather than black women to other, to other people, right? Not just black men, but anybody, right? And it's like, that's what we're talking about. And that is what will ultimately cause this entire United States to fail, is this notion that the government has to be there to save you.
Oh
right?
my
God. I know it starts with family, and we all talk about that. Like, I love Larry Elder. I love, Thomas Sowell and these black conservatives who talk and who, because of the color of their skin, are the only ones who can talk about this, right? If you're a white person, you have no idea. It's terrible. You're racist, right? But what they say is so true. Like the marriage rate for these women, and they're out of wedlock children today, is what's causing this society for black people to just deteriorate.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so sick, and they're expecting more from the government. And now the answer is reparations, and it's like, When does the answer become personal accountability, to your point? But why would they when there's no accountability at the government?
It really
And,
is.
and
It tears through society,
it
right?
does.
Yeah, and the moment that you say, you know what, you're just a victim. You're not responsible for anything that happens to you or your life. And look, like we have to almost like you said, we almost have to say some things just so everybody knows we're not a bunch of, old racist, right? Like, look, things are not equal in America, nor will they ever be, right? And the thing that breaks the model is like you look at, how Asians do in America. From all sorts of Asian countries, they do better than white people in every characteristic.
Mhm.
Education, earnings, family, everything, right? So it's not about race, it's about class. It's about poor and rich. Is really what privilege is in America. I guarantee you, Tiger Woods, Oprah Winfrey, LeBron James, whoever you want to mention that's an African American in America has
Every
more privilege,
athlete, every athlete.
than I do. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, look, if you take the average black person, the average white person, I have more privilege probably than the average black person, but that's a measure of wealth. It's not a measure of race or color. Now, look, having said that, look, yeah, there's been horrible things we've done in America and, in the past and history, and we need to accept that and understand it. But we also need to move on. And to your point, like and you can find this on the interwebs anywhere, like up until about 10 years ago, nobody was worried about race in America. Like the numbers had gone, like every poll you would take, like can people get mixed race marriages? In the 60s, it was like no, like 70%. And it had gone down to like no 2%, like
Mhm.
just ridiculous. And our numbers in America are better than just about every country you could go to. Try going to somewhere in South America or Southeast Asia or even in Europe. You will experience much more racism than you do in America. Like there's literal hate.
I,
I have a friend who worked in South Korea for a time, and like he would go to certain gyms and certain restaurants, and because he was African American, they're like, "We're not serving you. You can't
yeah,
work out here." That sort of thing. Okay.
yeah.
And look, those are anecdotal. It doesn't decide anything. But the point is, to your point, look, yeah, we got problems. We're always going to have them. It's about what you do with what you got. And yeah, and the moment that you just like, nah, it's not up to you, man. The system is you
And
can't win
that's
the
the
system.
prop to me.
You're
It's
yeah,
yeah, that's
you're a
the
victim and you
political.
can't win unless we help you win. Like
And
as soon as you start believing that, it's like game over. Like you're just not going to have an effective, happy life after that.
so
You
so here's the question, right? How do we change the political system?
know.
Because and this is where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah.
There's no gain for politicians to say something like to somebody. If every politician were to say that to their son or daughter, they're not doing it. So
Hmm.
then why are they saying it? So they're getting it to get power and stay in power and to get votes.
Hmm.
So the real question is, how do we disband that idea, that's the systemic problem that we should be addressing,
Yeah.
is the political game of only getting votes rather than really caring about your country. And I understand that the circular reference here is, well, my policies will keep me in power, then I believe my policies will keep. But
Yeah.
there is this deviation that says, well, there's no way you can say that your policies are great for the country if you're claiming victimization from everybody and that there's no responsibility. So like,
Hmm.
how do we fix that, right? Like that's the thing that I've always been telling everybody, and I think part of that is term limits, right? That somebody can't be a career politician anymore, right? And then, but that's to me that's
I
somewhat.
think. Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
that
that
does at
solves
all. I
it.
don't think
It's
it does at
window
all. No, it
dressing.
doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah. To me, the answer, I mean, and it's a big one, right? Like but there's a wonderful saying. The answer to all your questions is money. And that's my answer to that question is like, you can't stop human nature of politicians preying on the weaknesses of the electorate to get elected. The only thing you can do is take money out of the government so that politician is not as powerful as they used to be. And I think that goes back to Thomas Paine. And I think it's in Common Sense. It's something like, people have so confounded government that they think society and government are the same thing. But society exists to help us prosper and grow and have our lives. Government exists to put people in jail when they commit crimes and to fend the border when we are attacked and those sorts of things. It can't solve societal problems. It can be part of the solution, I'm sure, helping to fund certain things and that sort of thing. But like, my answer is we have to take money away from them. So like a good example of that is in 1916, the richest man in America, John D. Rockefeller, could have written a personal check in the amount of the entire debt of the American federal government. The next year, they passed an amendment to the Constitution to start the income tax. And since then, the size and scope and shape of the federal government has exploded to the point at which Elon Musk, who is the richest man in America, if he wrote a check for his entire net worth, sold all the companies and just gave it all to the government, it would not pay 5 months of the interest of the debt. Not 5 months of interest. $260 billion. Our interest payment is something like $800 billion.
Yeah, I know. I heard that.
So that's the size and scope of how the federal government has changed, and what gives them such tremendous power now.
Yeah.
So that's my only answer, is like, take their money away.
This is why I'm a libertarian. It's like, get rid of just defund the government. Exactly. Yeah, defund the government. Don't defund the police.
Yeah, we need the police.
And by the way, how's that working out for you? It's funny.
I want to stop laughing, because it would be funny if it wasn't so sad and awful what's happening to our cities. I mean,
I read these anecdote things every now and then, and I never have time to do the research right now, but it's like, every time, and we believe this, every time you look at every industry, from education, to oil production industry, every instance where government has stepped in, it's made it worse. And there was a study about, I think it was Detroit, where they introduced higher taxes, right? And that has decimated Detroit. Where how's that looking for Detroit, where they've started to raise all these taxes, thinking that they're going to take that money and put it back into Detroit, which they didn't do. And so Detroit has just deteriorated based on that. If you look at the education system, where the government has come in and given all these benefits, our education is there. Somebody said something like, in the last 20 years, our education has gone up $1,000 per year in the last 20 years for the total cost, right? Annualized cost or something like that, $1,000 per year per person. Why did that happen? Do we really think that education has changed so profoundly in 20 years? Now, granted, there's been technological advances, but that's a small portion. Like, when you think about the broad scope of everything, education, sociology, math, right? Science, right? There are basic things that have not increased at the same rate of what we pay to get that. And yet, why did that happen? And it's all these subsidies from government to make it free. And it's like, of course it's going to devalue it. And it's just astounding how everything the government touches, it fails, or it gets so overly priced because of the power grab and because of the money grab. You're not wrong about the money piece. It's just insane. It's insane. And you're right. I think getting rid of the federal government and keeping it to the basic three things, right? Protection, like laws, protection, and like equality, right? Just to make sure everybody is yeah.
So this is keep talking, dude. I just wanted to
exactly. This was it. This was exactly. Yeah. Which one of these things? And by the way, Medicare is soon to be subsidized, according to the Democrats, is what they want to do. And that thing will also skyrocket because of the government intervention. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. Everything the government gets involved in, the cost goes up higher than the rate of other industries, right? And this shows that
Exactly.
college is the one they're most involved in. They finance all of it, and you can find, this is from my Substack, right? You can find like Stanford has more employees than they have students.
So
Can
sick.
somebody explain that to me? Now, look, they're a
So
research
sick.
facility and all that sort of stuff, but nonetheless, you can use students in research. They have more employees than students, and Medicare, healthcare is the same way. To your point, it's just it's growing at 2x rather than 3.5x, right? While everything else remains pretty stable.
Right.
But man, like I just saw this stat. Actually, I looked it up because somebody was giving me some noise on Twitter about this whole issue, and they're like, "Oh, the threadbare safety net. You're going to destroy the threadbare safety net." And so I'm like, wait a minute, threadbare. So I go and find out. I'll just look it up. It took me 2 seconds. And 2022 fiscal year budget was $6 trillion. 65% of that is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. 65%. It's almost $4 trillion.
Yeah.
And you do the math, that's $12,000 for every man, woman, and child. It's $40,000 for every taxpayer.
Hmm.
So every time you pay your taxes, you're putting $40,000 onto, if you can, if not somebody else is, right, onto our welfare system. And that's supposed to be threadbare. Now, the answer is it's insanely inefficient. You know what I mean? Like, you could give everybody $12,000 a year, and man, they wouldn't live very well. But you think families, right? So $36,000 for my family, for your family, we could live, we could
Hmm.
exist.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It would
Yeah.
suck, but
Yeah.
we'd make it.
You find a way. You find a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what we're spending on just Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
I know.
It's
And this,
insane.
the Schweiker, the representative, one of the Republican representatives here in Arizona, beats the drum about this. He's got a great speech on Congress about this, and he basically breaks it down like you did. He goes, look, for all you new freshman people, let me just break this down for you. He's like, and he explains the exact same thing that you just did. He's like, we can sit there and talk, and what I can't stand is the Democratic talking point that they want to take your Medicare and stuff like that. We have to address it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And all they want to do, and this is what I'm so sick of hearing. This is why I love what Gates was doing. I'm so sick of hearing, well, our projections over the next 50 years will start to pay this down. How about now?
Yeah.
Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
sits there, not that I know of. We put things on the credit card, which is a real problem, which is also what the government does. So why would we expect our people to do anything different than the government does? And it's
Yeah,
like, and he
that's
just breaks it down exactly like what you're talking about. And he goes, we have to fix the 60%. He goes, all the rest of it is nonsense. It doesn't even, it's budget dust compared to what is going to happen in the explosion of this.
that's
And
right.
that's the real problem.
Yeah, and I did what I was just showing. Well, no, that wasn't. That was different. I did an article about healthcare costs, and in 1999, the average insurance premium for healthcare was 11% of the average median income, the
Mm,
median income. So your monthly premium costs you 11% of your salary, basically, or
yeah,
your income.
yeah.
In 2020, after they put in Obamacare to bend the curve and cut the costs, it's 24%.
Yeah.
It's more than doubled in 20 years. And there's no savings coming. And then people are like, well, then we need Medicare for all. Medicare's costs are skyrocketing at the same rate. I mean, you pull up a chart, even I did this the other day on Twitter to prove somebody wrong. You pull up a chart of the cost of the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, and it's like this, just like our healthcare costs, right? Because it has perverse incentives. The people buying the service don't pay for the service. The people providing the service never tell you how much it costs. Nobody says, wait a minute, do I need this $500 test? Because I don't have to pay for it. Somebody else is paying. So like there are all these perverse incentives in the system. And let's be honest, Congress creates that sort of system because the biggest lobby in Congress is insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. So they want to devise a system, and they did, whereby those companies make a whole lot more than they ever did before. The insurance companies are like, are you kidding me? Everybody has to buy my shit now?
Yeah.
Awesome. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
like it's all bullshit. It's all nobody is trying to cut healthcare costs, because if they did, the first thing you do to cut costs is introduce market forces.
You, you know what they needed, and it goes even to me, and this is how my brain works. It goes even before healthcare costs. Nobody's trying to make people healthier.
Yeah,
That's what cuts costs.
that's right.
It's not, and I'm not saying that. Look, accidents happen,
Yeah,
right?
can we talk about how fat we are all, including me? Like when are we going to fix that shit?
When
That's 80% of it is people are over fucking weight. You know what I mean? Yeah,
the
and
sugar
everybody
industry.
knows.
Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. It's the sugar, and it's like, and it's like, get to the root cause of all this stuff,
Mhm.
and nobody's going to be healthier when healthcare is free, because they're going to go, well, a doctor's going to take care of it. What do
Yeah,
I care?
yeah.
You know,
I'm gonna eat that fucking bacon, man.
I'm going
Because
to.
yes, they'll give me a pill for that.
Instead of going, could you imagine if they sat there and said, all right, you know what? And they started to do this a little bit, right, where they go, but it's such a farce how they're executing it, where the companies, the healthcare companies of any company will sit there and go, well, if you walk 3 times a day, if you take a glass of water, like, you accumulate these points that get into a lower. But one of my buddies is about he's about the same height as me, about 6'2". He's about 205 pounds. He is all muscle. He is a fit dude, but his BMI is like 16 or 18%, right? Because he's just a thick dude. And they go, oh, you're unhealthy. And
Yeah.
and he goes, and by the way, he does 50 push-ups, right? Or like can do like 30 pull-ups and 50 push-ups. The average person could probably do 6, right?
Hmm.
And they go, so he's got to do 30, and then they go, okay, you got to do 40 next year. And he's like, but the person who has to do 6 just has to do one more, and they hit the same value. And it's like, the whole system, and we go,
Yeah.
well, and that's because everybody has to be equal, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is where we go back to the equality piece. We're not, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's take real measurements. And if my buddy, who is really an athlete, who works out all the time and goes to, he should definitely not be paying what everybody else should. And it's like, this is the part, to me, it's how do you incentivize the right behavior?
Yeah.
And that goes into welfare, unemployment, all the major systems of anything that the government does. They should sit there and say, what are you going to do to earn this? There should be no handouts just because you exist or are in this country. Like,
Hmm.
that's the part I think that drives me crazy. Is
Yeah.
these aren't rights, right? You don't
Look,
have a right to a job, right?
yeah. I think it goes even further. Just like simply stop incentivizing bad behavior. Let's just start
Exactly.
with that.
Exactly.
You know
No,
what I mean? Like
yeah,
forget
that's fair.
forget rewarding good behavior. Let's just stop paying people to
Yeah,
do stupid shit. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I'm with you. Like the BMI is ridiculous. I'm 6 feet tall and I'm a wide, like I got broad shoulders, and I'm overweight. But like the BMI chart, I'm 6 feet tall, and I forget the number, but I think it says I have to be like 180 to be not overweight. Dude, I graduated high school fit at 185. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
apply to me, to big dudes at all. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's like, I mean, part of the American diet has made bigger people, not just fatter people, but taller. Like all of the calcium that we drink and some other things. Like, Americans are large people generally, even compared to ourselves 80 years ago. You look
Taller
at
and larger. Yeah.
yeah, go look at the conscript list of people that enlisted in World War, guys that enlisted in World War II. They're all like 5'6", 130. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
shit has changed.
You don't see a pilot that's over 6'2", because there's just, you're not fitting in there. At least not too many
Yeah,
of them. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's like they're designed to be
yeah. And
5'10" to,
it's from nutrition. It's from wealth, right? That you get bigger. But yeah, I mean, yeah,
access to food, all the rest of
yeah,
the
yeah,
stuff that's caused all of us to get bigger. But the access to food is fine. It's not access to crappy food, right? Like,
yeah. So that's
in
the other
it,
thing I was pointing out is like, go look at a picture of people at the beach in the 1970s.
yeah,
They're all skinny. There's no
yeah,
fat people there.
not
There's
many.
none.
Yeah,
And then go fast forward 50 years later to today and go take a picture of people at the beach. They're all fat.
yeah,
And again, including
yeah,
myself, right? So like, and you just look at that and it is the sugar, the corn syrup sugar revolution. Somebody convinced somebody to say, if you eat red meat and protein and fats, that makes you fat and you're going to have a heart attack. And that study's been debunked, by the way, but that's what started it all. And then you got the corn lobby, which has this huge influence because Iowa's the first state for presidential elections, their caucus
Yeah.
primary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like suddenly corn syrups and everything. And they made everything full of sugar instead of full of fat, uh, because fat was bad and it was going to cause you to have a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And we all got 30, 40, 50 pounds heavier
because of the sugar. It's literally because of the sugar.
Yeah, it's the worst.
So
Yeah, it's the worst. It's worse than alcohol. It's worse than nicotine. It's worse than anything.
And more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah.
It's like,
and so like, let's just start with that, dude. Let's just like, yeah, and see,
and the worst part about it is
here's the problem with your question, right? Like, how do we fix this? Like, you get into like, well, we're just not going to let people eat sugar anymore, and it's like you can't do that. You have to let them make their own choices. Like, in order to live in a free society, you know what I mean?
They're addicted, and your taste buds will change. Do you know what I mean? Like, the things that I thought I stopped trying to eat as much sugar in the past, and my taste buds, the things that I used to eat, I eat now, and I'm like, that's disgusting. Like, that is all sugar. I can't do it anymore. And we've tried to go to, and Jen, I give her all the credit in the world. We've gone to more whole food health, whole food plant-based kind of diets. Although I still do bacon and such, I think there's a balance, right? I think any of these extremes have got to go away. Like we got, I want to do a non-extremist party. If RFK Jr. wants to do a party, he should do they call it the non-extreme party, like the middle party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
I guarantee you though, if you went back, and there's people that are like this, would your grandma eat it? If you went back and like just ate what your grandfather ate, as bad as it might have been, and saturated fats and cholesterol and all that shit, you'd be better off.
Probably.
And,
it was more natural.
Not you're doing it right, but like the modern American.
No, most people. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Instead of the candy bar, eat an apple. Instead of when you run, by the way, I'll be. It's
eat crazy. A chocolate covered apple. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Like,
well, and here's the thing: like, whenever I crave sweets, literally fruits to me now are so sweet. Pineapple, banana, orange, apples, they are very sweet. And they satisfy that sweetness. It's crazy, and it's better for you because you can digest that stuff at a slower burn, right?
So that's really interesting. I was reading this thing, and I can't remember it all. It was a couple of months ago now, but it was about the like medieval, like Middle Ages European diet. They didn't have sugar at all.
No.
Somehow they mentioned in this article, in fact, people at that time thought urine was sweet.
But that's what I'm saying about our taste buds have changed.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It'll change. Yeah. Yeah. But the problem is there's like for me, to your point, the addiction thing, and there's so many choices and they're so easily available. Now I can just pick this damn thing up and go beep bop boop and boom, my fat ass shitty meal is on my doorstep. You know what I mean? Like it's so easy. And some of that's like it's actually amazing. Like if you went back even 100 years ago and you showed somebody your phone and you said, hey, you want some prepared food? Yeah, let's go to the kitchen. At that time it took all day to make dinner, a couple people. And now it's like, okay, you want some prepared food? What do you feel like? Just like go ahead and beep bop boop. And like 30 minutes later, it's at your doorstep. They would think you were a wizard. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you conjured up food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's amazing and incredible and also really fucking bad for you. You know what I
mean? It's crazy, but it's what I think is what will be the downfall of the civilization is this lack of responsibility towards getting something, like whether it's an education or healthcare or food, right? Preparation. And when it's so easy, when everything is so easy to you, you don't work for it anymore. Our work ethic, the thing that was and has built this country, is going away.
It's almost gone. Yeah, it's amazing. Like you mentioned education, right? And that's a real pet peeve of mine. Like one of the first articles I wrote when I started doing this thing was, the country doesn't owe you anything. We didn't sell you your education. Your beef is with the college or the university that you bought that from. You need to go address that with them, why they sold you this thing for a ridiculous amount of money that's useless. And then you think about that, like the ethic that you're talking about, and why somebody would have gone to college 100 years ago and why they go now. I mean, almost everybody that goes to college gets a degree that they don't use. They don't go into that field.
Yeah.
What the hell were they doing? And there's so many problems with it. Like at that age, 18, 19, 20, I don't know about you, me, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I know my son doesn't have any idea what he wants to do. And I think most people have no idea what they want to do.
By the way,
we're like,
that's
you have to choose. You have to choose,
Yeah.
And give me 80 grand a year for it. Like, what are you talking about?
Think about that think about that premise, right? You're a 17-year-old and you are defining what the rest of your life is going to be. Why are we putting this kind of pressure on 17 and 18-year-olds? Mm-hmm. This is crazy.
It's insane.
By the way, and when I mean education, I'm not talking about the classic college education, because I 100% agree with you. I just mean real life educated, right? Like understand math, English, like a set of standards, understand interest rates,
finances, that's what I was gonna say,
finances, real estate, understand markets. And I don't mean just the stock market. I mean real estate markets, understand, basic economy, right? Like that's, and understand how real world works. And then that to me is more valuable than calculus for 85% of the engineers out there that have ever gotten an engineering degree. Like I don't use calculus at all, right? Yeah. It's like that's to me is the big thing. So when I say education, I mean that more broadly.
But it's simple things too, dude. I was talking to this young guy who was all up in arms about Medicare for all. And then we start interacting. I'm like, it would work for some things, like sure, like major medical surgeries, things that are ridiculously expensive that you can't predict. That's why you have insurance. That's why you have insurance for your house or your car or whatever. It's like this big impact thing that you cannot plan for that costs lots more money than you have to spend. That's what insurance is for.
High severity, low frequency.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for the technical term.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. Honestly. Yeah. High severity, low frequency. I love it. But like, why do I need insurance to go to the doctor? All I'm doing is prepaying for a service that some actuary thinks I'll do 6 times a year. It makes no sense. And this kid was like, what do you mean? I was like, you could just go to the doctor and pay cash for your visit. He's like, well, no, you can't. You have no idea what they might charge. I'm like, dude, do me a favor. Call your doctor right now. Say, I don't have insurance. I have the sniffles. I want to see if I have a cold or a sinus infection or something. How much is the visit? They'll tell you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Now call 5 places and go to the cheapest one. You know what I mean? Like none of that exists in our healthcare system right now. And that's why they can charge whatever the hell they want to, because nobody shops around, nobody cares. And he had no idea that he was paying a copay, that there was an actual cost to it, that he could find out before he did it. And then as we're talking further, he's like, and then I went to this one doctor and I found out after the fact they weren't on my insurance and I had to pay some. It's like, dude, why did you go to a doctor that's not in your insurance? Like people have no idea what they're doing.
And this I agree. It's like, I'm telling you, it's the education of the real world. It's like, how do we do that? Right. I don't think like reading and math, those are some fundamental things, but like I don't know if we need to read these classic books anymore, that don't really teach us real things. Like I agree with you, like statement reading or like understanding how banks work or and this is where I'm all over. I totally agree with Vivek. Understand how your government works. Understand that the people who are responsible for your livelihood, how that works, how you're empowered, how to vote. How does our I was talking to my dad the other day about the whole McCarthy thing. And he goes, oh, I was like, Dad, 9 out of 10 people don't even know who the House Speaker is. This is not going to matter. And I said, and by the way, those 1 out of 10 that do, 90% of them are in Washington. I was like, nobody gives a shit about the House.
And guess what? Half of them are, Democrat or Democrat leaning, and they're very happy he's gone for whatever reason.
The fact that you mean to tell me the Democratic Party is fascinating. We'll kind of shift gears into this.
Yeah.
Because the Democrat, they're so interested. I'm really trying to take this more step back. I don't want to, I've really lately have gone into the games of politics, right? Like not necessarily issues. And what I'm fascinated about is how the Democrats are going to lose is based on the idea that they feel like they can't lose. They are bewildered. I saw this clip on for MSNBC, and this is what got me thinking about all this. MSNBC literally they go, these polls just came out, and it shows on the topics that matter most: the economy, immigration, crime, like
Oh yeah,
jobs.
it's like 50,
It was
20.
a 30-point swing, and they're like, I don't understand. And it's like,
No,
and what
no,
they
look,
don't,
let me interrupt you real quick to say half of that is just because Democrats are perceived to be the party in power right now. But go ahead.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it's
right.
their fault because they're in power.
Yeah, yeah,
But go
yeah.
ahead.
And it's like they sit there and they're so bewildered by this, and I'm like, that has to be the reason how they're going to lose. That they don't understand that what we don't have today is policies. We have spending. They go,
Mhm.
like if I hear one more KJP, like Karine Jean-Pierre talk at the White House booth about how Biden has done more for the U.S. person. I'm like, all he's done is pass an inflation reduction. All he's done is spend money. That's all he's done. He's done no policies. He doesn't have a policy on foreign. He doesn't. We don't have a foreign policy. We don't have a
Mhm.
banking policy. We don't have an inflation policy, an immigration policy. We have nothing. He has done nothing other than say we have a clean energy policy. That's the only thing that I know that they're doing.
And
And
meanwhile,
then it's
energy costs are
wrecking.
up 50%.
And meanwhile, the average American is poorer than they've ever been. And they go, look, it's working. And it's
Dude,
like,
my local electric is run by natural gas.
mm-hmm.
My bill last month was over $500. It's
Jesus.
usually like 300, you know?
Yeah,
And like you can have all
that's
the
what I'm
green
saying.
policy, you can have all the green policy stuff you want. We can get into that. I think it's just another racket, honestly. But
Of course
um
it is. Of course it's benefiting. It's
but
not
I don't
benefiting the
care.
people.
Like you were saying before, I don't care if the cost curve is going to bend 50 years from now. Dude, I'm paying $200 more a month for my fucking house to be air conditioned. You know what I mean? Like,
And by the way, there was a great, I forget who it was, somebody in Colorado. I was watching another congressional hearing. Man, I love this because you really get, if anybody ever has a chance to watch the congressional hearings, they should,
I
because
do.
they get to see their real, they get to see their real congressmen or their real representatives in action. They get to see how really stupid they are or how
Mhm.
really smart they are. And
Mhm.
it's like, and this one guy said, talked to I think the energy secretary, right? And he says, "Do you know how much carbon the U.S. produces?" And the guy couldn't answer the question. And he
Yeah.
goes, "Do you even know how much this would save?" And he goes, "Do you even know?" And he starts asking these questions, and of course they never answer. And he says, "Let me tell you something right now." He goes, "The U.S. is responsible for like 15%. Our car industry is only responsible for like 5% of that." And so if you get rid of our entire car industry, the impact you're making at a global level is 1%. Why are we putting this much pain on our people when this is a global problem? And they go, well, the US has to be the trendsetter. It's like, not like this. Not like
Mm-mm.
this. And by the way, if you really want to be the trendsetter, have us produce more energy cleaner than what everybody else on the planet is doing, and not send our money to our foreign either adversaries or send our money somewhere else and make it more expensive for us.
Not
It's
only that, but like, why do you think the UAW is on strike, right? Like,
right.
there's more than one reason, right? Like, some of it is they gave up a lot of stuff in the financial crisis, and now the big three are doing well, and revenues are up 40%, and the CEO pays up 40%, and the workers' pay is the same. So they
Yeah.
have a legitimate beef there. But it's also because everybody's going to be making EVs, and you need about 1/3 of the employees that you do to make a internal combustion engine to make an EV, because an internal combustion engine has all these complicated parts that have to be put together a certain way and all that shit. That all goes away. It's a battery and four wheels. So you don't need all these workers.
Yeah.
And so, like, look, yeah, like, nobody thinks about that impact, right? We're going to move everything to EVs, and I actually think it's good. Good, what Elon Musk has done there is really good, but it's not as good as people make it out to be.
No.
They've since come out with studies that show making the batteries for those things is very bad for the environment,
It's
and
it's it's
and making the
equally
solar
as bad.
and the solar panels actually are producing carbon dioxide in a way they didn't anticipate, and like there's all these crazy things going on. And
And yeah,
yeah,
go
yeah. So like is the planet getting warmer? Sure it is. Has it been getting warmer since the end of the last ice age 15,000 years ago? Yeah, it has. Has the planet ever had no ice caps at all? It sure has. Um, has the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere ever been bigger than it is? Yeah, by about an order of magnitude. So, we're arguing about 270 parts per million of carbon dioxide going to 400 parts per million. There's been times in the grand life of the planet when it was 7,000 parts per million. And it was cooler. This is like back in the Jurassic. It was cooler than it is today, and there were no ice caps.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you really talking about? Like, what
Yeah.
is the exact perfect temperature that our planet should be, and why? First of all, how do you know that? And and what about all of the things where, like, like something like 10 times more people die from cold in the winter than from heat in the summer. So as the planet gets warmer, we're saving lives in that sense. We also can grow a lot more crops and food because plants survive better when there's more carbon dioxide and more heat.
And that's
Like
one
there's
guy
all
said
these
too.
weird effects. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not trying to say forget the green lobby, we shouldn't do any of it. We should do some of it, right? Like, yeah, it's good. But the way they present it and the way they try to make it an existential crisis that you're going to die in 10 years if we don't, get rid of all of gas and coal and all that thing, it's ludicrous. And the people that pretend like they know what they're talking about have no idea what they're talking about.
Man, it goes back to what you said. It all comes down to money.
It's all,
These people are going to
it's
get money
all you put,
somehow
yeah.
from the
Al
government.
Gore, Al Gore has made a God-blessed fortune on pitching green energy and investing in green companies. And he still shows up to all the meetings in his private jet. That's everything you need to know.
That's exactly, I know. And look, it's no different. And now take that same philosophy and put it towards social justice, right?
Mhm.
And Black Lives Matter. And like they got all the money, and then what do they do with it, right? And now that one guy's under investigation, I forget who it was, right? The guy who wrote the books that said, "Hey, we really need to teach our children not to be racist." I'm going to tell you right now, my son is the least racist. My son has no idea what racism is. I don't know why we would ever need to teach children how to not be racist. They don't give a shit. They're not looking at anybody. There's no way they're looking at anybody like, oh, I'm not going to play with that kid. He doesn't care.
And they're less racist than we were, and we're less racist than our parents were, and they're less racist than their parents were. I mean, you don't have to go back very far, many generations, maybe one, maybe two, to find somebody who used the N-word on a regular basis, right? But the point is, we progress,
In 2 generations, Black people couldn't even use the same bathroom or the same water faucets or do that stuff. Just in
Yeah.
2 generations, which is not long, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I don't know what the right amount of time is, but I can tell you right now, we've been in this country for hundreds of years, right? This society has existed for thousands of years. 50 years is a short amount of time to go from a belief system and an order of things that was not correct
Yeah.
to
And
today.
and here's the thing.
And black and white people can it's insane that we don't at least acknowledge the progress at all. Like at least that's what the mainstream doesn't do, and especially the
Yeah.
Democratic Party. They don't acknowledge any, and that's what I always thought was interesting about the DeSantis thing and about the new curriculum they're teaching. What is wrong about teaching about how black people during slavery picked up skill sets that they used post slavery, right?
Mhm.
And we're not saying that that's the way to go, but I'm
And it's like
saying
one line in an
it's one
appendix.
line
Yeah.
of
Written by
800 pages.
written by some folks, some of the it's all educators, all PhDs and this, that, and the other. Some two of whom were descendants of slaves, and they wrote that.
Yeah,
And you can't have it in. Yeah, it's ridiculous, and
it's so sick.
and
It's such a
and that goes
sickness.
back to like a misunderstanding. This is where what you were talking about before in terms of education, I think, does require some basic fundamental like classical education so that you understand that the history of the world is slavery, and subjugation and dictators and fascism and all of the awful words you want to use for tens of thousands of years. That's the way we have lived. And the Western civilization, Western Europe, the United States, Canada, to some degree, and the United States in particular, is basically the one force that has tried to get away from that history of slavery and subjugation. The world had slavery before the United States was invented. And at our founding, we argued about whether or not we should continue with this awful practice. And the only reason we didn't is because we couldn't get the votes out of the Southern, slave
And
owners
the democratic state
to start the country. And there was a broad discussion with Ben Franklin and John Adams and even Thomas Jefferson about how bad that was. But Franklin's like, what are we going to do? Not start a country because of this issue? We have to. We'll fix it later, is basically what he said. And look, our country struggled for the first 80-ish years over slavery. That was the main political argument.
It was a civil war.
It informed everything. But even like when they would go to say, okay, we're going to make California a state. Is it going to be a slave state or a non-slave state? We have to keep them even. Like that was the politics. And, some really righteous liberal dudes, liberal Republicans in the Northeast and elsewhere, basically said, we have to abolish slavery. And they started a movement that 30 or 40 years later got Lincoln elected president and started the Civil War. Where has that happened before? What country in the history of the world has fought a war to end slavery within its own boundaries? Where? When?
Yeah.
Ever?
Yeah.
Never. One time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, you don't get any credit for that. No. This country's racist. Everywhere's racist, dude. We're getting less racist,
And it's, to me, the saddest part of all is the lack of recognition that people lost their lives for this cause. Mm-hmm. Not for gain, not for prosperity, not because it was the right thing. And we want to give that no credit. Yeah. And all they want to do is talk about how Black lives were destroyed. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think we recognized, by the way, and we recognized it.
Yeah.
And the United States fought a war for it.
Yeah.
And then we said, here's
and then spent another 100 years trying to fucking work it out with a bunch of racists that lived in the country.
And it wasn't perfect when it first came out. Yeah. It wasn't perfect, right? There was still true racism at the highest level it's ever been, and it's dissipated every year. Yeah. And it's like, that happened. But it's like, you can't blame the United States. You have to blame the whole slave trade for getting you here. This happened before.
That's the first thing I love, especially when it's somebody who's European. I'm like, okay, you want to complain about the slaves in America? Your beef is with Great Britain. Your beef is with Spain. Your beef is with the Netherlands, the Dutch.
You should be with all the Africans.
The West Africans who didn't invent slavery, but had slaves when we showed up and said, "Hey, you want to buy some?"
Here you go. These people.
And then these Europeans started buying them there and taking them to the Americas, mostly the Caribbean, but eventually to the United States before it was the United States. But we didn't invent any of that shit, dude. And this United States has been, again, a force to correct it. Is it fast enough? Is it perfect? Of course not. But it is the force in the world trying to correct some of these ills. And so to impugn it at that level, it's just demonstrates a lack of understanding of what's happened and all of the people that have lived before you and the things they've delivered to you on a silver fucking platter. And sit around and mope.
And what did you do with it?
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest thing is what did you guys do with it?
Yeah, including us, dude. I'm not saying I'm an angel. You know what I mean?
No, but
yeah.
But you're not wrong. It's what happened, and this is where I want to see Uncle Tom's too, because it's like what happened to the Black culture. You're right. Asians had it bad, Jews had it bad, the Irish had it bad, everybody who came here all had it bad,
Mhm.
right? Like they were all immigrants at some point, and blacks eventually became the same immigrants that everybody else were.
Now, there is there is an important distinction, right? Like
Sure,
all of
they came
those
here on their
other,
own account. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the
No,
Italians
no,
and
I
the
get it.
Irish
I
and the
get it.
Chinese, like, right,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Africans
No,
were brought here against their will, and it is a very different thing.
it you're not
But
wrong. Yeah.
but if you look at black culture, even under segregation, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, before the welfare state, it was hard to tell the difference between it and white culture, in the sense that they went to church every Sunday, they believed in the nuclear family, you took care of your own, all of those things that we think of as American existed in their culture at that point. And even while they were being discriminated against and treated like shit, they had a wonderful, vibrant, awesome culture. And, something happened and it's all destroyed.
They there's the statistic out there is fascinating. Is after slavery, black prosperity grew at the greatest rate. Now, granted, it came from the lowest point, but they
Yeah.
grew at the greatest rate during that period because of, to all the things you just mentioned, work ethic. They also had all the skill sets that these companies, because they were the ones doing all the work, so now they're getting paid for it. So
Yeah.
they prospered. They had, like I said, the proper work ethic, and it's like, what did happen? And it seems like all of it comes to this point of like welfare, and it's like it's again going back to, when you hand out something, it cheapens it, and then when the government gets involved, it wrecks everything. And
Yeah.
when the government got involved with the black culture, or poverty, actually it was in the name of poverty. It just so happened at the time that more blacks were at lower poverty levels than anybody else. So, at a disproportionate amount, they got hurt the worst.
Yeah.
And it's like, can we not agree that at some point that this system of handouts doesn't work?
Yeah, I
Right?
agree.
Like,
I think
can
what
we? Can we?
happened too, and like, I'm no expert on this, right? Like,
I'm not an expert.
yeah, I should find somebody. But I
Thomas
think
Sowell. I've been
yeah, I
doing a
love
lot of
Thomas.
Thomas Sowell. Oh,
Yeah, he's great. But
he's,
one
he's
thing that did happen, I think, that caused some of this change that was for the negative was, segregation became much worse in the South, where most of the black population was at that time. And there
mm,
was a huge migration north to the cities because there was less racism. And I think that's sort of the start of it, right? Like once they move into the cities and they're in these sort of, for lack of a better term, kind of ghettos.
mm,
You go to a shitty neighborhood in a city, I don't care what the race is or the ethnicity is, there's some bad stuff going on there, and it's not good for people. And cities at that time were super racist. You went to New York City in 1930s, it was run by white Democrats, mostly Irish guys, Italians, some. And so, like, as much as they didn't have separate restaurants and that sort of thing, there's still a ton of racism. But I think that's part of it. Like you said, they had these skills, and mostly in an agrarian society in the South. And then stuff got so bad in the South for them, they left and went to the cities. And I think that started the problem too.
I think that what what at least Thomas Sowell had talked about is that the minimum wage wrecked unemployment for
Nobody
the
knows
low.
about this. There's another guy, Walt Williams, who I like. He's a black economist. I think he passed away, but he talked about how the minimum wage started, and
Mhm.
it was unions in like New Jersey and New York and those places. And the reason that they put him in a minimum wage was not to help poor people make more money. It was because their unions, especially like construction unions, were losing contracts
Everybody in the South.
to companies that use black workers, and they
That's
can
right.
pay them less.
That's exactly right.
And
That's what
so
I've heard. That's what I've heard.
yeah. And yeah, I just read this from Walt Williams. And so what he said is they put in the minimum wage so those companies that were using black workers could no longer have a cheaper bid for a project, because they had to now start paying union level wages. And so it was just a point to squeeze out black workers from getting these jobs to build to build America, basically, and so it's completely racist was the progeny of it.
It's amazing how every good deed
Yeah.
it has come with unintended consequences.
The answer to all your questions is money.
Is money. But you're
You
right.
were talking about before, gosh, what were you saying? Something about like, why people feel squeezed out and that sort of thing. And I think that's really important. Like why the Democrats don't get it. Right. And that's what I wanted to say is like, Donald Trump became popular because of this issue. It is, when he won in 2016, he won swing states, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. Those are the places that we used to make things at, right? They used to be industrial superpowers. And ever since the late 90s, we let the Chinese into the World Trade Organization. We became a global sort of economy, sort of structure. All those jobs went to China and other third world countries. Those people got hollowed out, and nobody cares. The Democrats used to be their party. It used to be the party of unions. It presumably still is. But they've done nothing to help those people. And along comes Trump. And, it's crazy because he's like the epitome of the, wealthy billionaire that you should hate. And he's probably made most of his money through shady dealings, let's be honest, right? Like he's no saint. But he talked to those people in a way that made them think he understood what was happening. And then when he gets attacked by these same people,
it's like they're attacking their own.
Yeah. The same people attacking Trump and arresting him and, doing all the stuff that they do to this swath of America, these working poor and lower middle class people, they see those people squeezing him out as the same people squeezing them out. And if he can beat the rap with them, maybe I can too. And that's what Democrats don't understand. That is the only reason he's popular. If somebody came along with a message that resonated to those issues that didn't have all the baggage of Trump, they'd be elected immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they like Joe Biden, because he's Scranton Joe,
and by the way, it's an even race in Pennsylvania. But what's funny is I think it was the MSNBC pundit that basically said, if it was not Donald Trump and it was some other, the Democrats should hope that Donald Trump is the guy because of the dysphoria that the other side have towards Trump. If it's a Republican, they're screwed. If it's any other Republican, and we've talked about this before. What I've always found funny is how the Trump dysphoria says, I don't care about the state of the country. I care more about hating Trump than I do about the state of this country. It's the policies. And this is what most people don't understand about the Republican Party. And this is what I couldn't stand about what Hillary said the other day. And I just wish they would go away. But
he's running, dude.
It's
all right. I got a little aside here.
Yeah.
I've been saying since May, Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic nominee.
No, there's zero chance. He's not going to make it.
He's not going to make it. The polls are upside down. Yeah. He's got health problems that are clear. He can't stand for a 2 hour.
He can't.
He won't be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy now. They're building a border wall. But I think you notice Hillary Clinton has been in the news for like a month. She was gone for like 2 years. She's been in the news a few times this past month, dude. She's running. And so is Gavin Newsom. He's clear.
It can't be. It won't be Clinton. She's not going to win.
No, but
she's not even close.
I don't think so either. But I know she thinks.
Clinton is using the same playbook that lost her both times. She is not connecting to half the country.
Deplorable.
She doesn't even care about half the country.
Yeah, you're talking about let's get this. We should play this shit where she said people should be reprogrammed, right?
Yeah, it's insane. And she called all the MAGA extremist cults. And it's like, what she doesn't understand, it's not about Trump, you idiot. It's about his policies. It's not, people don't love Trump. If you talk to 8 out of 10 Republicans, they're going to go, I could care less about Trump, but his policies are better for this country. right? That we need to have some sort of, and look, when we talk about immigration, people talk about a wall just to slow down the rate so that we can actually process people like we should and treat them humanely when they come into this country. That's what we talk about with a wall. It's not we don't want anybody coming into this country. We're built on immigrants. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Nobody is saying nobody should come in. I've not heard one Republican talk about how we shouldn't let anybody in this country anymore. They all say, slow it down, be responsible, and then put policies in place. And the crap that really bothers me is when the Democrats go, it's the wall doesn't do anything. It's policy. You're the congressmen. Go figure. The AOC said the other day that that policies is what really is going to do this. Well, where's your policies? Where's the policy that says? And then they go, well, there's such a bad problem at the state that it's so hard. Blah blah. Then slow down just tell everybody to stop coming for a little bit. Get your technology, whatever they want, which I don't understand at all how that's going to work. They say, implement the technology, then open the gates back up. They're not doing it.
Yeah, I saw somebody the other day that said it brilliantly, like, we need strong walls and a wide gate, right? Like,
yeah.
and that's the issue is like, and like Trump got in such heat for saying this 7 years ago. He said they're not bringing their best people. There's rapists coming. There's murderers coming. And everybody said, "Oh, he's just called every Mexican a rapist." No, he didn't. Right. He's saying the people that are coming here are not all good people, and they're not. And we don't even know who they are half the time. And that's the point. Is like, yeah, we need immigration, but we need immigration of awesome people that will help us build a wonderful country, not just like, apparently they're like now opening the jails. Like, just go ahead.
In Venezuela, I heard the same thing. Yeah. And why wouldn't they do that? I would do that if I hated America.
It cost me a lot of money to keep these. It cost me a lot of money to keep these guys in my jail. I can just send them to America. They'll get right in. Yeah, like, we need a great immigration policy that pulls in the best and brightest, right? It's not 1890. Do not send us you're tired and you're poor and you're yearning to be free. Please don't. We can't afford it.
And every country does this. Yeah. Every country does this. They all go, no, Australia has a point system. Which is an ageist thing too. If you're 40 and you're not educated, you ain't getting in that country. You're not getting a citizenship. Yeah. But if you're highly educated in your 30s and you know what I mean, and you bring something to the country, they want you in. You're going to be on a better point system. And is Australia racist? Nobody ever talks about the racism of Australia, which I would imagine is somewhat bad. But but all countries, to your point, are racist, and they're way worse than we are.
Yeah, let's have a border and let's decide who we want to let in. That's all we're saying.
All I'm saying is slow down the pace, figure out and my whole point is this: close the borders until you come up with a proper policy. Yeah. If you don't have one, then we can't let people in. If you don't have a policy, then we cannot let them in, period. Yeah. That's the point. I think that's the whole point.
Here's the other point I was kind of saying it flippantly just a second ago, right? Like, we can't afford it. Like, don't send us your people. But the point there is, like, when we started that, in the 1800s, basically, there was no border control in America until, like, I think it was 1920-ish. Mm-hmm. We let anybody cross the border. We needed people. And there was no welfare state. So it wasn't like once you cross the border, you get all these free things and cost us all money. Mm-hmm. It was like, look, you can come here, but you got to
You're on your own. You're on your own.
You got to figure it out, dude. Yeah. There's the Wild West, go grab 40 acres and see if you can make it work. Or go to, Bethlehem or Birmingham and open up a business and see if you can make it work. Now it's like, here's your free cell phone. Here's the hotel that you're staying at. You know what I mean? Here's your free 3 meals a day. Here's your clothes.
Here's your house.
Yeah. And look, like on some level, we all want to be good Samaritans and good charitable people and help people, but like, it's unsustainable. We can't have 3 million new people show up here needing, basically every form of subsistence. We can't afford it. We can't afford what we have.
We can't even afford to give it to the people that are already here that are like that. Yeah. And yet, and by the way, all the inner city people who are talking and complaining in Chicago and New York hey, where is this for us? They're not wrong. They are not wrong.
Yeah. The best policy of the Republican Party in the last 10 years is busing migrants to sanctuary cities. It is so smart because of the way that these cities were like, oh yeah, we love immigrants. Just bring them in. We'll take care of them. Okay, here you go. And
You know
suddenly it's like, oh shit, we can't handle all these people. New York is closed. You know what I mean?
you know what? Yeah.
It was the most brilliant move that has ever been. And look at it now. Look at it now, dude. Just this week, Senator Mayorkas, who should have been impeached 2 weeks after he took office, is like, we have to build the wall in this place.
Well,
and they're doing it while, but wait, at the White House, Joe Biden says, oh, they made me do it. I don't really think it's a good idea. Did you see that? He said building that wall while his government is now building the wall. He said it's still a bad idea, and they made me do it. And it's like, who's they, dude? Aren't you the president?
Okay, two things to that. Man, you've uncorked like this whole thing. Two things to that. Number one, the biggest liar on the planet is our president.
Oh,
first of all, didn't you have full control of Congress 2 years ago to he says, oh, I couldn't do it because they wouldn't repeat it, or they wouldn't reappropriate the funds. You had all control for 2 years. Where was that? So it is your fault. Yeah. Where were you? And number two is, God forbid you don't spend the money. It's not that they do anything illegal. What, you think you're going to get arrested? They won't even arrest your son who doesn't pay taxes. You think they're going to arrest you for not spending, for not appropriating funds? Who's going to get arrested if we don't do this? You know what happens? The funds get reappropriated somewhere else, or they get taken back.
It
God
happens
forbid
every day.
That happens.
It happens every day.
Every day.
Yeah,
and it's so insanely stupid.
But they do that on purpose, though. So let me just take a quick point there, like, because this concept of, hey, they had both houses of Congress, and yeah, they didn't have 60 senators, but you can work a compromise with 5 Republicans. They do that on purpose too, man. So the way I think of it is abortion. So Dobbs passed in 2022, the beginning of 2022, where they got rid of Roe versus Wade. It's now up to the states. You had a Democratic Congress, you had a Democratic president. You could have at that time said, look, we're making Roe versus Wade law. Again, you probably have to do a compromise in the Senate with somebody, probably get the weeks down to like, Roe versus Wade was 2/3 or like up to the second trimester. So it's like 27 weeks, I think. You could have gotten 5 votes in the Senate for like 20 weeks or 25 weeks or something in there. Like there was a deal to be made, I'm sure. They didn't even try, because the best thing that they have to run on now is abortion. Is the Republicans are going to take away your right to abortion, ladies. And that is why there was no red wave in 2022. I guarantee you. Single issue Democrats showing up for Roe versus Wade. And that's how the Democrats are extremely smart on one level. Their national parliament, and look at them, like, we just had 8 Republicans vote to get rid of the speaker and 200 vote to keep him. Democrats, everybody votes exactly the same.
Yeah, they conform
every time,
which I think is funny, because the whole squad and all that are supposed to be the records of the Democratic Party. It's all fell in line.
So full of shit. And one level is really smart, because that's how they maintain power. And let's be honest. Up until the 90s, the House of Representatives was Democrat for 70 years. No, 50 years. After World War II. It was Democrat every year for 50 years. And, they still pretty much, the Republicans take the House every once in a while. They get the Senate every once in a while. But generally speaking, it's like half Democrat or all Democrat most of the time. But this is how they win. They don't take the issues off the table. So they don't pass the law to fix Roe v. Wade. They make it the major campaign issue. And so even though the economy's for shit, inflation's for shit, we have a demented president that doesn't know where he is half the time, we don't get the red wave in 2022 that everybody expected, because all the Democrats came out for Roe versus Wade. They're doing it the same way with this policy with immigration. They believe it is a wedge issue that they can continue to maintain power by not solving the problem. And so, and so like, this is what our government does. They do not solve problems. They work to maintain power. And this is why my answer is take the money away.
Yeah. This all
You know
comes
what I mean?
back to that. No, I 100% agree. I
Yeah.
100% agree. Hey, one
And
quick note.
I just
One quick
wish people knew this. Like most people don't understand this.
or most people see it. Like, can they see through it? Right?
Yeah. Look, the
It's what.
Republicans are just as bad at this shit. I
Oh,
hate
no,
most
no,
of
yeah,
them
yeah,
too.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
By the way,
I
this is
just
not a
tend to,
Democratic thing. Yeah,
yeah. I just tend, I'm a right-leaning libertarian, so like I vote Republican a lot. I tend to agree with them on a lot of issues, but they pull the same shit. You know what
they're
I
just
mean?
not as good. They're not as good
They're
because
not
you know
as
what the
good at
problem. Well, you know
it.
what it is. You know why? You know why? Because the Republican agenda is more financial based, not heartstrings social based.
Yeah.
So you don't get the energy and you don't get the vibrancy of wanting to vote, the passion
Well, you
towards
do,
the
but
social.
here, so generally I agree, but like you take the abortion thing, there's a bunch of Christian conservatives that are probably more energized to go vote than maybe the extreme on the left about abortion or
Oh man,
whatever
I
you
don't
would
know.
say.
I don't. I don't.
They're
Yeah, I don't
just
know.
they're just it's a smaller amount of people. That's the
Oh
problem.
yeah. No. Yeah,
It's
that's
like
what I was. Okay. No.
10,
No.
twenty
We're in agreement.
percent of the
Correct.
electorate, whereas,
Correct.
the strong pro-abortion is probably 40%. So
That's
that's how
right.
they win.
That's right.
They
And
pick
then
the
there,
right.
and then the middle is everybody else who doesn't give a shit, right?
Yeah, it's like
Like not
pick
that we don't care, but it's like, yeah.
every I think it's like 28 of the 30 Western democracies in Europe has an abortion stance. They passed it decades ago, and it's like 15, 20, 25 weeks, somewhere in there. And they all agreed, and it's done. They don't ever discuss it. They don't ever discuss it. Think about that.
I
We
know.
discuss it every goddamn day. And
Every 4 years.
well, two now with Congress, right?
That's fair. That's
But
fair.
I'm never going to have a kid. I don't care. Like I have my own thoughts about it, but it's not up to me. Like I can make a pro-life argument in my mind for sure. And I can make a pro-choice argument in my mind for sure. And I think parts of them both are right. And so for me, that means I don't get to tell somebody else what to do with this shit. That's what it means for me. And like, I mean, so Bill Burr, right?
Yes. I love that.
We saw him in Tampa last time he came here, and I think this joke is on the Red Rock special that we saw. They do like their jokes leading up to a special. Anyway, it was like he did abortion, and he said all the things that you would say if you were pro-life, like it's a woman's body, and she has a right to choose, and who am I to decide? And he's getting all these claps, all these ladies are going crazy. And he's like, wait a minute, lady.
Yeah.
You're also killing babies. Which is so funny. And also kind of true. And also, I don't know how to square the circle. So I'm out. You know what I mean?
To 100. Dude, I'm so with you. If you can come to grips, and this is what nobody likes to talk about in the pro-choice camp, which I'm a pro-choice camp because I'm a libertarian, right? I don't want anybody telling anybody what to do, right?
Yeah.
And I believe
that's where I end up.
when it all comes down to it, it's your belief about life, right? Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, you are ending a potential life. That when you consider life to happen, that's the belief system. And I go, you can't put laws into place on beliefs. That doesn't make sense, right? Like because there's no real scientific or proof that something is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know when life begins. I don't know if it's inception. I don't know if it's 3 weeks later. I loved what was it? What's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson said his metric is life begins when the baby is able to sustain itself out of the mother's womb. And I'm like, that's a fair point. I feel like that's a good way to kind of put that level there and say that whatever date that is, right? So if it's 8 weeks, 20 weeks, doesn't matter.
So I agree. And that's what Roe versus Wade was in the 70s. They said basically, look, after the second trimester, we think a baby would be viable. So that's when you can't do it anymore. The issue now, though, is there's been a lot of advances in medicine. And so I don't know the exact figures, but it could be as early as 20 weeks,
Yeah, but see, that's not sustainment of itself. That's machines doing it. So to me, it's you get back to the primal state of this. It's like, you know what I mean? And again, it's unfortunate we talk about, and of course, nobody's ever said, if the mother's life is there, I understand that, right? And
do it.
Of course, everybody.
As long as it doesn't become, this sort of bullshit where it's like, it's like a box. Is the mother's life in danger? It's a box you check, even if it's true or false, so you can do the abortion. That sort of thing. But you know what I mean? Like, there's a slippery slope to everything. Like, I was just giving somebody some
and
noise on the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. I can't stand that dude. His spokesperson was like, "Hey, we didn't cause this." I don't know if you saw, Hamas attacked Israel.
Yeah, I did.
And of course, Hamas is funded by Iran.
Iran, yeah.
And we just did a deal with Iran where we,
gave them $5 billion for
it enabled $6 billion to go back. And so this national security spokesperson is like, we didn't do this. This has nothing to do with us. It's disinformation. We made sure there were checks in place so that they could only use that money for food and health and all this. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you understand that money is fungible? Like, once I have it, I can spend it however the hell I want to, and you can't stop me. Like, what are you talking about? That itself is disinformation. You know what I mean? And it's just amazing that people get away with saying shit like that. No, you gave them money. They might have spent that on food, but that means that they had some other money that they were planning on spending on food to give to Hamas to kill 100 Israelis. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves about this.
Yeah. You know what's funny is it's not about me. It's not about disinformation anymore. It's about being dishonest about your statements.
Yeah.
He's not wrong that they did do those things, but it's dishonest to think that it couldn't have. We can't make that connection, or they didn't feel empowered because you put money over here, that now money can flow over here, and those are the bad people, right? Like, so it's being intellectually dishonest to say that there's no connection.
For the purpose of misleading you so that you don't hold me responsible for the dumb shit I just did.
That there is a potential for that to happen because money is fungible, right? Exactly like what you just said. So let's have an honest discussion about this stuff. It's not about disinformation, it's about being dishonest.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, don't do that. One really quick, I wanted to go back to one point you said about the governors shipping the immigrants up to New York and such.
Yeah.
Did you realize that they've only shipped 13,000 immigrants?
Yeah, well, the federal government does it too. That's what nobody talks about.
No, I agree. Yeah. Nobody does talk about it. But New York has a problem of over 120,000 immigrants.
Yeah.
So Texas is only doing 10%.
Yeah.
The rest of them all understand that New York is a right to live state, and that when you go there, it's in their laws to give people food, housing, phones, and all the rest of that stuff. That's what a sanctuary city and some of what they've voted in to do.
I'd be interested to find out, though, out of the 120, and I'm not sure we could, but how many, because the federal government will also, and I don't understand how all this works, but for some people, they'll be like, where do you want to go? And they'll buy them a plane ticket or a bus ticket. And
that was a big issue 2 years ago when that plane went overnight, and everybody was like, what the hell? Right? Because everybody was wondering why they got a plane ride to wherever they went. I think it was New York or New Jersey or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we were all going, what are they doing? But you're not wrong. If we've forgotten about those details.
It's genius. So, and one of the things.
But it was genius to put it on the national level.
Yeah.
But I believe, honestly, it was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, because 7 million people are not going to find their way. They're going to get out of the two states. It's just that Texas decided to kind of to expedite it. But the reality was, it was
make people understand what was happening. That's what I mean.
People understand.
Yeah. Somebody talked about. And so my just real quick, my last job before I jumped out of the airplane, the company was based in Seattle, and so I have been to Seattle probably 4 or 5 times over the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You would not, if somebody like put a blindfold on you and put you on a helicopter and just dropped you off there, you would think you were in Kabul.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it kind of looks like an American city that's just been blown out. Like, all the shops are gone. Many of the restaurants are gone. I don't know how many, but a lot of shuttered restaurants. And like, you go to dinner, this corporate event, and you walk outside and there's 50 people in an open drug market shooting up heroin, smoking crack, doing that thing where they're like zombies. You know, have you seen the fentanyl zombies where they're just like standing but completely,
Yeah, yeah,
just like,
yeah,
just zombies,
yeah.
and it's just everywhere. And like even friends of mine that work for that company that live there and are, Seattle's a very liberal town, very progressive town, and they're like, this is a disaster. Like everybody, half of them moved out to the suburbs to get away from it. And, there's not even a recognition that this is going on in the government there,
So I think it was Fox that had this one person that that he interviewed him and said, "Hey, do you have an issue with this?" And the woman was like, "Why? Is it really affecting you? Is it bothering you?" And she's like, "Then what do you care?" And it's like to
Yeah.
me, it was astounding to hear that somebody just does not care about the decency and like that these people need help,
Mhm.
and enabling them to do this in laws where we're not putting them, locking them up and putting them in an area where they can't do it anymore is sort of a form of help. It's a little bit more crude, but it's a form of help that they just not on the streets and making it worse for everybody else, and then eventually getting violent or doing whatever, like the guy in New York. And
Mhm.
it's like I don't know, man. It's amazing to me, especially in Chicago. That mayor, that dude, what did Democrats think that was going to happen by lowering in DC and in Seattle and San Francisco and Chicago by not prosecuting people who break the law?
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen when you say you get a
Yeah.
slap on the wrist for stealing things that are under $900? What
Yeah.
what did they think that like and I think it was Larry Elder who basically said, I was more fearful of my father than I was of the government to do
Mhm.
anything stupid. And it's like these these flash mob attacks on businesses and with no repercussion and a police force that feels like that they've been demoralized and they can't do anything. And if they do anything, the fear that they'll go into jail because of excessive force. Meanwhile, we tell them to go into high pressure situations. And it's like it's just so wrong on so many levels. And I'm not saying and the fact that we sensationalize the 1/10 of 1% of the incidences between police and blacks, and I'm not, George
Yeah.
Floyd was a horrific incident,
Yeah.
but it's not representative of
No.
the broader interactions that happen. And it's like that to me is the part that I'm just like,
It's awful. Yeah. And it's sensational. Like that's what news is, right? Like, hey, look, you don't turn on the news and like, hey, look at all the wonderful things happening today in America, right? Like that's not what's news. What makes news is stuff like that. And it gets sensationalized and there's a recency bias and an exposure bias that like, oh, I've seen 4 videos of that this year. This must be happening everywhere. And meanwhile, nobody scratches into the data and says, shit, police encounter 300 million criminals every year. And this shit happened, I think it's something like 30 people shot that were unarmed were shot by police in a given year. And
right,
more than half of them were white.
right,
Now, the percentage of black people that are shot unarmed by police is higher than the percentage of black people in the general population, for sure. But that's easily controlled for the things we talked about before. Being poor and being living in a neighborhood where there's a ton of crime. It's like proximity to violent crime is the main factor that gets you shot by the police, unarmed or armed, right? And yeah, look, it's just like we were talking about before. Are there racist cops? Sure there are. You know, probably the dude that killed George Floyd was one of them. But again, for the most part, it doesn't happen. More white people get shot by the police than black people. Again, proportionally, there's more black people than their general population. But the whole narrative was just misguided. And yeah, and it creates all this turmoil and all these problems and all these perverse downstream consequences. Like, okay, we're not going to have bail anymore. We're not going to prosecute anybody. And on some level, you feel like, oh, I'm doing good, or I'm helping these disenfranchised folks, but you're not. You're not helping anybody. And there are some, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I've seen stats where it's like not only all of that, but like the violent criminals are like the same 3,000 guys in New York. It's like 3,000 dudes that commit vast majority of all the violent crimes, and they just keep letting them out. And it's silly. It's like the simplest solve. Just put them in jail. There's two things there too, and um, there's a thing about young men, especially, but young people in general, that they become anti-societal, almost psychotic, at about 17, and it's a general thing that happens, and they think that it's basically like when we were, prehistoric. We lived in these small communities where most people are family members. And so when you become of age to reproduce, there's a biological need to mix up the DNA with other DNA sets. So fuck you, dad, is actually a biological evolution. So I leave there, I go find somebody else, and our genes mix, and it's better for the overall population. And when they did studies, they seemed to figure out that this ended at about 27. It's different for everybody. It's a statistic, right? So the data has a bell curve, but basically it happens from about 17 to about 27. It's why my teenage son doesn't want anything to do with me right now and thinks I'm full of shit. And then, there's an old Mark Twain quote: when I was 17, my dad didn't know anything. And then when I got to be 21, I was surprised at how much he'd learned in the last 4 years. and it's a thing. And so one of the things that they used to do for sentencing, and I don't know if they do this anymore, but this was a Jordan Peterson, he shared a study about it. It's like they would just put people in jail until they turned 27. Like if you created a violent crime, if you were 24, 3 years in prison. If you were 21, 6 years in prison. Basically the same crime. So that you would get to the point where you were 27 and you were ready to sort of participate in society again. So yeah, I find that fascinating, right? And it's like we're not allowed to talk about that sort of thing, and we're not allowed to certainly implement any policy based on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why we run into all these problems, is we just like pretend things that are obviously true are not true for narrative or other sort of touchy-feely, feel-good kind of, you can't talk about people that way sort of reasons that are valid on some level, sure. But at the end of the day, they're not practical. And then we just like pretend like all the stuff we used to know that worked, just throw it out. Let's just try something else, and then we wonder why things are falling apart and crumbling around our feet,
Yeah, and I always wonder, and again, this takes you back to I I would love to see, and this goes into the, can criminals reform, right? Or better yet, should the sentence not be based on time, but rather some sort of merit of that person is now and can be a positive contributor to society.
Yeah, that would
And
be
it's like,
awesome.
I know it's a romantic gesture, but it would be great. I know they say, there's libraries and in prisons and stuff like that. And I think that I think that I would argue that you could sit there and say, look, you you're in jail for 20 years. But if you good behavior, get educated, do
Mm-hmm.
these things and turn your life around, you could be out of jail in 5, right?
Yeah.
And so that you, and then somehow, and again, we talk about all this stuff, somehow put them in a position to be able to work at a construction company or something like that, just to start earning money, to change the behavior, something along those lines, that say this is how you operate within our society. Now, if you do a crime again, right, which I don't know if anybody disagrees with reform and second chances. But if you do a crime again, then you've proven that you're not a part of the society, and you're just going to stay in jail. And then what you do is you put them into a different place that will be there forever, low cost, low budget, right? This is your choice. You're not going to get any more rights. You're going to get whatever you want. If it's and too bad. And if you're allergic
Yeah.
to
What if
peanut
it's just
butter,
like What if it's just like an area,
That's what I'm saying.
fairly
And it's
large
just let
area,
them all do whatever they want, right? And it's just
whatever you
right.
want. Yeah.
Yeah, take
I
an
had
old,
this, yeah,
yeah,
it's kind of like
yeah,
Running Man or one of those old movies, but
totally,
like,
totally.
wouldn't it be great if like you took all the guys on, I had this idea 30 years ago, take all the guys on death row around America and, give them each a gun with one bullet in it. Put it on a,
Well, I say
put
give them
them
a
on,
town, give them a
put them
town,
on,
and figure out let
yeah,
them
put
all
them on a
battle. Who's the
field.
top
No, put
guy?
them on a
And
field, reality TV show, pay-per-view.
yeah, that's how we make
One
money
guy,
now. We
one guy
make
wins.
it.
One guy wins.
Yeah.
He gets out. Everybody
Mhm.
else is dead,
Yeah.
and we just save the taxpayers hundred. Although, you find out now that a lot of people on death row actually are innocent, or at least some larger percentage than you would be comfortable with, I guess is the way I would put it.
But to your point, but at least you're not killing them. You're letting them figure out their own
Yeah, they
fate
figure it out.
amongst those that are like minded. So let them.
Yeah, and I
All
love
right.
this idea of taking, especially the younger kids, but anybody who's first offense, even if it's violent, and say like, look, yeah, learn to read and write, learn a skill. We'll do chain gang work program kind of thing where you can go out and actually work for a construction company for a period of time and see if you can handle it and hack it, and then yeah, we let you out early. And maybe you get 3 strikes. Maybe second time, okay, it's a little bit tougher. And then the third time, if you commit a crime again, that's it. You're going to the field that we're talking about. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. To me, third crime would be like capital punishment. Just end it.
Yeah, just end it.
It's like
But
like
see,
why are we being humane to those that are inhumane to us, right? Like where are we? Why are we setting that morality, right?
because,
It's
I think it's a positive one. It's charity, man. Like just because they're terrible doesn't mean we should be.
So did
Like
you see the video of the two kids that ran over that police car in Nevada?
I don't think so.
Man,
Did it just
two,
happen?
it happened about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Two kids filming in a car, laughing about it, and the one kid goes, "Hey man, hit that." Police officer is on his bike. He's a retired 6 months earlier police officer, which I don't know if that matters, right? It doesn't matter who it is, but the fact that they dedicated their life to police officer work, it probably makes this even worse.
Mm-hmm.
But two kids are in the car. The one guy, they're laughing and they go, "Hey man, go hit that guy." The kid turns the car in, runs the cop over, kills the cop. They go to jail. And the kid says, "It doesn't matter. I'll be out in 30 days because they're both under 17." Justin, there's no place for that in this society. And your DNA has to be so miswired or misguided. There's no helping that. And I don't believe that we should spend any money and any resources to help that. I just don't. You know,
Uh, I disagree, dude.
it's
I
okay.
understand
That's
where you're
okay.
coming from. If the kid was 30, I would agree with you. But at that age, it's just like they're not old enough to decide if they want to be trans or not. I don't think, you know, I just
This is
think
the
at
tough one,
that
man.
young, there's still hope for a kid like
There,
that.
I think
I
if
mean,
you
shit, dude.
got,
We did some dumbass stuff when we were that age. We never killed
not,
anybody, but
not
I remember stealing
purposely.
candy bars from the little convenience store on the way home from
Listen,
school, and
listen.
I remember doing all sorts of mischief, like pranks and breaking shit, and
This is Justin. This is on a level
I
like the
know it
same
is,
thing of,
it
of
is.
people that I'm talking about, like people that want to commit suicide. I'm certainly not saying they're just miswired and they need. And for the people that are committing suicide, I feel bad for because it's an affliction. It's something that's happening to them, right?
So,
But when you're doing it to somebody else, you are wired in a way, right? I'm not saying that people can't change their minds or they can't change for those that want to kill themselves. I'm just saying that's a very powerful instinct that is not natural or it's very rare, right? And for it to
oh, I
happen to you, I
think
believe you
I
need help.
think the impulse to kill people is very natural. I think it's
Mm,
I think, yeah. So Solzhenitsyn wrote the Gulag Archipelago, which is like a book. So this guy was I forget why, but he was imprisoned in the gulags in the Soviet Union for I think 20, 30 years. And he wrote a book by memory
mhm,
because they didn't even give
mhm,
him stuff to write with. And eventually he
mhm,
was able to write it down and publish it, and people credit it as being part of the reason the Soviet Union fell.
mhm.
And one of the things he said is It's a great quote. I want to get it right. It's like, it would be so easy if there were just some evil person out there that we could go and
Hmm.
and get rid of.
And
But
yeah,
the
I see what you're
truth
saying.
is, but the truth is that evil runs right down the middle through
Mm,
every human's heart.
mm,
And so like there's, I think it's from that same book where it's like, in Ukraine in, the 1950s, when the Soviet was really cracking down, one in every three persons was an informant for the Soviet Union. So if you lived in a house of three people, it's likely one of those people is telling the authorities that you're not the right kind of kulak, basically.
mm, mm.
And you'd be, there's this, all these studies, like another guy, I'd open up my class in European history, and lo and behold, if I took a poll, everybody would have fought against the Nazis in Germany if they were there. They would have said this is wrong and stop doing that. And the truth is, none of them would have. Everybody went along with it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like I get where you're coming from. There is a point of no return where it's like, this is useless, this is hopeless, we can't fix this person. But I think everybody deserves a shot at it, and probably two or three shots at it before we give up on
Yeah, man, this
them.
I'll concede, and I agree with you. I think there is a primal instinct or a natural, kill mechanism that we all might have, right? It's
Yeah.
either a survival mechanism, it's something, but to the lobe or the mental mindset to suppress that and recognize the morality of that, of what you just did, if that's missing at that age,
Yeah. I
you're
think a
not
big
going,
part
you're
of
not.
it too, and this goes back to the pharmaceutical companies, right? Like a big part of it too for me, like my wife has a really good friend who's from the Czech Republic. And when you ask her about, like the homeless problems in these cities, she's like, we don't have it. And why not? Those people are in the asylums. And we used to have asylums where we
I
put
know, I
mentally
know.
ill people.
Yeah.
And look, some of those asylums were awful. You can just go watch a movie or two about some of them, and it's disgusting.
And
It's
they're based off of real things that
real
happened. Yeah.
things, yes.
Yeah.
But instead, we closed all the asylums and told these crazy people, here's a bunch of pills. We hope you take them. That's our policy now. Like,
Yeah.
you're psychotic, you're likely to want to kill some people. Here's your pills, man. You better take them. And you know what you find out with, like, not every, but a vast majority of the school shooters, and I would wager you these kids too that ran over those folks, they were probably on some serious mental health drugs. Probably something that's really bad for them that can fuck them up, and they stop taking it, and suddenly they have a psychotic break and go shoot up the school. Like that happens a lot, much more than we want to talk about. And then the argument becomes, well, you're just a gun guy, and like
I
you don't
know,
want
right?
to address the problem and all these things. But no, that's what it is, man. I guarantee you. I, I and I don't have anything to back this up, but I guarantee you, if we look into every mass shooter, mass murderer type of person, they had a serious mental health issue, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, and we just let it fall through the cracks. The
Yeah.
kid that shot up Parkland was sent to the cops 17 times.
Hmm.
And nobody did anything because they had a kinder, gentler, we don't, call the cop. I'm sorry.
We feel bad for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And it happens over and over and over again. Look, I'm not saying that's the solution to all of it, but it's a big part of the problem that we just ignore. And I bet you these kids, I bet you there's some background where, their life sucks and their dad beat them, or, they were hooked on fentanyl, or, I bet you there's a backstory, dude. There's two sides to every damn story, and I bet you they have one.
I don't know about the their medications and backstories, but my point is,
So what?
so what? And the other thing is, isn't it obvious that if somebody were to do something like that, that they have to have something mentally wrong with them? This is not a sane person,
Yeah.
right?
But
Like
that, to me, that's an argument from my
other
point.
Otherwise, no, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know about the medication piece because I'm just going, I don't know if I want to roll the dice on someone who doesn't take their medication to do something outrageous. My point is that those people don't have a place in this society because they can't be trusted.
Yeah.
That for whatever reason, whether it's induced through societal norms or genetic dispositions or whatever it is, they watch too much GTA, whatever that is, right? That if they're capable of doing that, they've demonstrated that I don't know if they can be fixed,
Yeah.
right? And
I'm
that's
with
where I
you.
go, I don't care if it's capital punishment or move somewhere, but it's like the argument, and again, this whole gun argument is so stupid to me because it's like if we really felt like this was normal, it would happen all the time. If people were normal and they just had one incident that really pushed them over the edge, I have been beyond pissed, right? For a variety of reasons. I was pissed when God took my mother, right? Or when I was pissed. But it doesn't it at no point did I ever sat there and go, I'm going to shoot up all the churches and everybody who believes in God because of that. It's like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's like that
It's a mental disorder.
it's
It
of
is,
course it is.
yeah,
It's of
it's
course,
not,
and then we don't want
you
to
know,
recognize it. And it's like, and I
it
agree with you.
it is Cain and Abel, which Cain and Abel, it's a biblical story, but it's really, really fascinating. The basic
Yeah.
premise is, and I always forget who's Cain and who's Abel. One of them did the proper things. They call it sacrifice, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what is sacrifice really? It's subjugating your current needs for the future, right? So, rather than eating that sugar-filled thing, have something healthy, right? Rather than going out and blowing your money on, hookers and coke, plant a field so your family can eat better in the future. That's a sacrifice. So he made the right sacrifices. And then the other brother made the wrong sacrifices, was doing the wrong things. And God basically told him, you're doing the wrong things, dude. Sin is at your door. And he got so pissed off about it. And within that, there's a choice. It's like, is it because of what I'm doing? And this goes back to what we were talking about before. Is it because of me, or is it because of all you and the whole
Hmm.
world is wrong?
Hmm.
And that goes back to the, it's not my fault, I'm a victim, all of that sort of culture. And when you start to play that game and you decide it's the world that's wrong, that's when you really start to say, I need to burn it. And that's
Yeah.
when you say, like, it's the Joker, man. Some people just want to see the world burn.
Hmm.
And these people decide that it's the world, the universe, existence itself that is the problem. And then they go and they try to destroy it. And so again, I don't remember, Cain or Abel, it was go kill your brother. For these Columbine shooters, it was go shoot up the school.
Yeah.
For these kids, maybe, I don't know. I don't know anything about it, but maybe it was go run over this old guy because fuck him.
Yeah.
You know? So like there is a whole thing there. And I think people can come back from that. I really do. But I don't know. It's life is suffering, man. Life is suffering. I've searched for religious enlightenment my entire life and I haven't found it. But maybe the closest is sort of a Buddhist Eastern philosophy. And that's the starting point is like, listen, man, life is suffering.
Hmm.
That's what it is. And yeah, there are happy times and there are wonderful things that are going to happen in your life, but most of the time it's suffering. And there's a certain acceptance to it, and then you stop struggling. And look, I'm no saint. I haven't done this, but the Buddha, he stops struggling and he tries to be at peace with what is there and what is.
Hmm.
And that's the whole philosophy. And I think we get caught up so much in the trivial, stupid things that are happening in our lives, and we think they're important. And they're not. Just slow down, man. Like take some breaths, go outside and look at the world. Be thankful for what you have, and try and make where you live a little better place.
Yeah. I Religion always is a funny thing, and because I just always think I don't like the idea that I'm not in control. And that doesn't mean I can control everything, right? Of course I'm not in control of a lot of stuff. But and more of the control is about how I respond to something. It's an event that's happened to me, right?
That's humanity. That's
Yeah,
humanity.
yeah.
The difference
And it's
between
like,
an animal and a human is that space between stimulus and response.
yeah,
An animal, and many of us are animals,
react.
have no space in between something that happens and my reaction to it.
Right,
But
right.
humanity is, wait a minute, take that space and think about how you want to react before you
Yeah,
react.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And that's
agree.
what was missing from those two teen boys. They're like, oh, somebody to hit. They're living in this video game world. I can't believe I'm an apologist for these guys now. It's kind of funny. But
I'm not.
like there was
I'm not.
nothing in between. Hey, there's an opportunity to run this dude over. They just did it, boom. And I think young minds are very impulsive like that, and they make stupid decisions for stupid reasons because they haven't gotten to that 27-year-old. I finally have a functioning human brain that wants to be a part of this society. That's
You
what
know,
I
I would somewhat agree with you if they didn't say the statement, "Well, I'll be out in 30 days anyway."
Yeah, that's fucked
That
up.
was calculated, man.
Mm,
That they knew what they were doing. They understood the consequences. They
that's different.
knew
Yeah.
it's that statement made me go, "Oh, yeah, like, like this is not something that's
Yeah.
medicated, impulsive, like switch.
That's a really good point. I hadn't considered that. Um,
Um,
it
and
makes me think that I'm very happy we have, I think, still a justice system, with due process and a speedy trial and a right to a jury of your peers and all those sorts of things. I think that's really important, and it's lost on a lot of people. And I think it goes back to some of the defund the police stuff, right? It's like this is a two-tier justice system where rich people get exonerated and poor people go to jail.
unless
And
you're Trump.
yeah, well, he hasn't been to jail yet, but I
But
think
yeah.
at the base of what people that are trying to do that, defund the police or no bails or whatever, they're trying to solve that problem. It's the wrong answer. It's a completely wrong answer, but they're trying to solve that problem. I hope that's what they're doing.
And honestly, this is all going to come back to it comes down to the money because I do believe our justice system can be bought. The
Yeah,
two-tier justice system, to your exact point, is no
if you
different
have
from
enough
bought.
money, you can stall, cajole, extend, so that the consequences for you, if they're not zero, they're so much smaller than a poor
It's
person
more
that
than
can
that.
afford to do it.
It's even you can do all those things. You can afford to do those things, but it's even more than that. You're affording the connection to the fraternity of judges
Yeah.
through clubs and gifts that shit like everybody wants to talk about it at the Supreme Court level with Thomas and a couple others that took jets and did vacations and stuff like that. But that stuff's happening across all, and you're right, everywhere. So then it's like, how do we? And again, it comes down to how do you fix that? How do you get rid of the money system and out of every system we have?
Mhm.
The
Yeah, the
justice
courts is a
system,
tough
the
one because, like, to me, like I think a
courts
lot
are
about
very
Congress. I think a lot about Congress, like that. Take the power away from the federal government is really the solution. But the courts, that's a different. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And
That's not one that I spend a lot of time on. I'll have to think
yeah,
about that too. I've spent a lot of time on our welfare system. I spent this time on the power, our political system. I spent this time on some of our, probably like energy and well, actually the rest of it is pretty much capitalism, right? Like, and
yeah,
that's fine. Like for the
sort of.
economy thing, sort of, right? But the problem, to your always point, the problem is when you get the government involved, that's where it just
Yeah,
wrecks
because that's why I
everything.
say sort of, right? Like every progressive and liberal loves to rail against big corporations, and the older I get, the more I do the same. And every conservative and Republican wants to rail against big government, and hardly any of them put it together that it's the same damn thing, and that big corporations,
Are
most part,
controlling the government.
control
It's
the
the
big
same thing,
government.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the
Exactly.
big government is in cahoots with the big corporations. Like they're all like Occupy Wall
Totally.
Street and the Tea Party are basically should be the same thing, fighting for the same things. And that's what I've been trying to convince people with the country That's really what I'm trying to do, is convince people that it's all bad for you and it's all bullshit. And
Mhm.
none of them actually have the American people's needs and wants in mind. They don't
Well,
care.
you know what? All right. So here, and I somewhat disagree with you.
Okay.
They care in the sense that they go, but they put their own beliefs ahead of everybody else's feelings. So
I think it's more than
what
beliefs. It's their own fortunes. It's their own
well,
power.
I think that convolutes everything. I think the problem is that they can get powerful and prosperity through the government, and that's the problem. Like I believe that everybody thinks that their most representatives believe that their sense is correct, like that they think this is going to work, like they truly believe that those people that are committing crimes are victims themselves and they won't commit crimes anymore, so we just have to stop doing it. I believe that's their general sense. The problem comes in when their own personal benefit and bank accounts start to grow with that objective.
Mhm.
It's Black Lives Matter. There was a horrific incident that happened. There needs to be some kind of social reform. Maybe police do need some reform to remove and increase sensitivities and stuff like that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. The problem is now all of a sudden the bank accounts started to get hit for that movement and nothing happened, and then greed comes in and the money, and it's like that's what sours everything, and then they want more, and the way to get more is to continue to sensationalize, right?
Sure.
And it's like, and then the money becomes more important than the cause. But I
Mhm.
believe that people do have the right intention, even if it's misplaced and misguided. It gets overrun by the money.
So I
So
I agree with that. I
because
think
there would be no incentive for them to do anything other than truly reflect and see what's happening to the people. Think about this for a minute, just and I'll let you think about this for a minute. The Democrats say we have to be lower on crime. They do that and they look around at their communities and they're getting overrun by drugs and crime. But then they go, it's fine, it's fine. You know why they're saying it's fine? Because they're getting paid. They're getting rich off of that. They're going to
mm,
get reelected off of that.
yeah.
That's the problem. That in my mind, that's how the circle works.
Yeah, well, that's what I was basically going to say is, yeah, I think on some level, like the, sort of cliche, like everybody goes to Washington thinking they're going to change the world, but the system itself changes them.
That's right. It's a
And
swap. Yeah.
and very very soon, like you mentioned before, AOC and the squad, right? Like very soon they're voting right along with the minority leader of the House, just like the dude that she kicked out of her district to win that seat was doing, right?
Mhm.
And that's the thing that really uh, is at play here, in my opinion. I agree with you. I think people start out trying to do the right things and think they have the answer, but the system overtakes them. It's this
Yeah.
own huge blob that eats up everybody. And it's there as these representatives and these presidents and these senators, they come in and out of Washington. Some of them are there for a very long time and they become the system. Guys like Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and some of those other guys, like they are part of the system and there's nothing good about them
Hey,
in
you
my.
know why? Because they knew how to get rich off that system.
Oh yeah. So that's what I want to go back to. But I wanted to say this too, like, the Democrats, we were talking about this before, they're very good at maintaining power by doing that, by everybody votes the same. But it's also an oligarchy. Like if everybody votes the same, what's the point of having a vote? Like
You only need one person.
yeah,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
leader says this is what we're doing, and everybody steps in line. So is that really democratic? Are you really representing the people? I don't think so, right? So they're all culpable in this thing. And then yeah, it goes back to, oh, the other thing I want to say is I suspect, and I have not seen any reporting on this, and I think it's probably because you probably get killed if you try it. But I suspect that the Mexican and Colombian drug cartels have a significant ownership of our political class. I think in one way or another, and again, I have no proof of this. I'm speculating 100%, but it puts the puzzle pieces together. Like, why would somebody who wants to solve crime allow it to continue and fester and get worse and worse and worse?
But
And there's not a lot of possible answers. One of them is they're making money on it, and who would pay them? Well, the drug cartels would pay them. So, I'd really like to see. I'll have to go do some research and see if anybody's looked into it. I suspect, again, there's not a lot on it because they get killed or they get threatened and they stop. But I would not be surprised if there are hundreds of millions of dollars changing hands with some intermediaries, of course, between the drug cartels and our leaders.
That's too dark for me, but I think it's more about what you said earlier. They stay in power with problems.
Yeah.
They're not going to solve problems because the people because you don't get elected on good news.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
So, and look, man, I gotta run pretty soon. We're at 4:30. I gotta let my wife know I'm alive. But that's why I like Ron DeSantis. Boom! I said it. And I talked about this after the last debate. He's got a really good formula. He identifies a problem. He says what he would do as president to solve it. And then the third piece that nobody else on that stage can say, here's how I solved that problem in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you take this issue of progressive prosecutors not prosecuting crimes. He's fired 2 states elected state's attorneys. One was here in Tampa. I forget where the other one was. Fired them because they're not prosecuting crimes. He's like, look, Vivek or whoever can stand up here and say what he would do. Here's what I did. Yeah. And by the way, we have the 50-year low in crime in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. And you can go issue after issue and he can point at that. Oh, you want to talk about education? We got rid of the books where it showed you how to have gay sex for second graders in our schools. Yeah. And we did this, that, and the other. We have school choice. And we have these other things. We were just named number 1 in education by U.S. News and World Reports. Boom. And look, he's getting better. He's terrible on TV. Like, he's the worst politician.
He's actually getting better. He's actually
getting better. But for me,
he's not a politician, because he's not like a true politician.
Yeah, he's not a salesman. But I don't want a salesman running the country anymore. I want a CEO. And he's done fabulous things here. And so that's why I'm on him.
Yeah. I like him a lot. Mm-hmm. I think he and Vivek to me somewhat scares me sometimes, because it's like, what has he done? But he talks the logic that I like. He has the same reasoning, right? He asks the right questions, and his approach is great. And I think DeSantis is the same way. I think DeSantis had a terrible campaign, so I don't know if he's going to recover from that. Like his campaign manager, he fired everybody for very good reason, because he stayed on. Yeah. He stayed.
They're now saying they're sending half the campaign staff to Iowa.
Yeah,
I think it's very smart.
It's smart, but it's that to me is last ditch, right? He's on the last.
Here's the other thing, and all the polls, and he said this sort of, but he's right, dude. It's still 4 months before the first vote is cast, and even that first vote is the first of many over the next 4 or 5 months as well. Yeah. The game hasn't even started yet. And we're on, the pregame show on at 12 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and we're deciding who won the game. Mm-hmm. He can't win. Hasn't even started yet.
No,
you know what I mean? Just because somebody says in a poll that they're going to vote for Trump does not mean when they show up at the caucus they're going to vote for Trump. It just doesn't, and it never has. Yeah. And it's gotten worse the polls to me get worse and worse every year, because they're still phoning people up. And who the hell answers their phone? The type of person that answers the phone to answer a poll is not the electorate itself. So I can't also say that's my hope that is true as much as it is fact. But yeah, I just think this game hasn't started yet. Let's see what happens.
It's a data point, right?
Yeah.
And it's always funny to me because if you're on the beneficiary, you go look at the polls. And if you're the person who doesn't go, you're like polls mean
That's the
nothing, right?
thing.
It's
Yeah,
so
statistics are
I
like
agree. It's a data point. It's supposed to be weighted,
yeah.
right, for what it is for both sides, right? But the reality is, right, and you know, in this particular instance, you could see it, right? He had a strong momentum. It petered out. I like the guy a lot. I wish he would understand the game better, right?
Yeah.
And he reminds me a lot of how I would run a campaign, where I would be like, "Hey, look, I'm here for the solutions, but you don't win on that.
Yeah,
You
totally.
you win
So
on recognizing problems, right?"
I have two stat quotes that I love to use. The first is, everybody's heard this one. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can make statistics say whatever you want them to say, and you
Whatever
see
you
it all
feel
the
like.
time. Like whenever you see somebody say a percentage increase without the numbers behind them, or
Yeah,
the
the
number
context.
increase without the percentage, you're like, he's fooling me.
Yeah.
And then like some of the polls, like I saw one the other day because I'm a junkie now, right? It was 400 registered voters for a national poll.
Right.
Okay, you ask 400 people. Like registered voters is the only thing worse than polling registered voters is polling all adults. Like the margin of error for that shit is probably 15%. You know what I mean? Like just because you're registered that's why they end up doing likely voters, and it's n equals 1,000 at least, and all these things. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
and kind of like we're talking about with other things, polling itself is a business. And people requisition polls, and people doing the polls have opinions, and they are paid by someone, and they can they can't like completely throw a poll, but they can do some things to make it say what they want it to say, whether
And
it's
they
the
can,
type
and
of
they'll
questions
word
they
it.
ask,
That's
the
right.
type of
That's
questions they
exactly
ask, or who they ask them to, when they all these things. That it's a game. And then the other stat quote I love. It was from this old Dr. Art Uleen. He was like this NBC guy with a bow tie, old guy, but he said, statistics are like bikinis. What you see is interesting, but what is concealed is vital.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that's the polls. I mean, like to your point, like a trend, and over time, and an average of them, but still, like polls said Hillary Clinton was going to win.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So,
yeah.
I don't know. And again, it's wishful thinking probably too, but I just tend to not put a lot of
I don't do too much. Look, I'm in analytics, right? I mean, I'm a data guy.
yeah. You know
I'm a
better than I
numbers
do.
guy,
Yeah.
dude. I can tell you right now, I teach everybody, all of my guys and girls and such. Context is everything. To
Mhm.
your point, numbers alone, and that's when this administration is of all the other things that are out there, they're full of shit because they just use rare, like actually, like they just say numbers. They
Mhm.
go, is our border open? They go, no. And they go, well, you've let in 7 million people. And they go, but did you know that we also turned back 1 million? And it's like 1 million of the 7 million is the one that matters about an open
Yeah.
border. It's not how many you turn back,
So
right?
is 1 out of 7 a passing grade, or yeah?
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's like, but did you know that we've turned back more than ever in human history? And it's like, but more have come in more in history. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, that's where it gets dishonest. They're not wrong. They're just dishonest. And that's where
Mhm.
it's not disinformation, it's dishonesty, right?
Mhm.
They're not, and that's the part where I feel like what's funny about all this, and we'll head out soon, but our culture is very forgiving. It is one of the most, and it's, you said it right about this country. We've persevered and defended those who traditionally can't defend themselves, right? It's the reason why we stopped slavery. It's the reason why we have immigration. It's the reason why we do love sanctuary, and to be a sanctuary country, right? Is for those things. And yet our politicians don't behave in a way that says that they can feel like they can be wrong. And the people will still love you, right?
Mhm.
And the people will still understand that if you're wrong, but you have a better path, right?
That's right.
And yet our government doesn't act that way. They got to act in a way that says, nope, we know what's best for you. This is what the whole problem with it. And this is what Hillary Clinton's problem is. She knows what's best for you. She's going to tell you what's right. She's going to tell you who the people are bad and who the people are good. And it's like, hey, don't forget that the people who have a ideological difference in your policies are also your neighbors, and they are your friends, and they are the people you break bread with, and sometimes they share drinks with. And it's like you have this thing that goes, man, this person is awesome from a social perspective. And as soon as you learn that they're a Trump person, they go, oh man,
Yep. Game over.
Yeah, and it's so funny how, wait a minute, you were just doing these things with this neighbor of yours, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like what we were promised out of this president was this compassionate, what did they say about him? They kept using this one word. Shoot, I can't remember. But they like, he gets you, right? He's middle. There's nothing about this guy that has done anything to bring this country together, nor has he ever said anything about how I represent all of you. He always talks about it as one side or the other.
Those
and you know what? By the way, but yeah, yet they're 50% of this country. And by the way, none of them are extreme. They're extreme policy people. They want policies. Trump represents policies that we think are better for this country.
Well, that's
so let's argue about policies.
It's branding, man. It's Madison Avenue. It's Madison Avenue.
So that's the game. That's the game, and that's the problem. One last thing.
Anytime I hear any buzzword like that, extreme MAGA, anti-vax, I can't think of all the other ones, but they exist everywhere. And I made this point the other day, and I think it's really important. That is totalitarian language. It is intended for you to label that person as something other than a human being. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Now that person is an extremist MAGA Republican. And what that means is I no longer have to treat them with humanity. Mm-hmm. I no longer have to engage with them in an open discussion. I no longer have to think about what's best for them or their family or anything like that. I can treat them like a kulak. I can send them to the goddamn gulags. That's right. And that's exactly what they're doing with that language. And everybody does it, right? Like you'll hear, the squad or the libtards or whatever it is that they say about liberals. It's the same damn thing. And it's the biggest problem with our politics, maybe more than anything else, is that we don't, like you're saying, we don't talk to each other. We put these labels on each other so that we don't have to think about how that person might be right. And that's a huge,
I think that is a huge problem too. Really quick, did you see Biden in the news where he went to that factory and someone approached him about the gun thing? It was on Fox, man. You got to see this.
This is crazy. Is this when he went to the UAW for 10 minutes and then went to a fundraiser?
Man, this was something. I'm gonna Fox News gets all the credit for this.
What's it called? So, we'll play it right now.
Hang on. It was just, hang on. I'm going to go to my YouTube channel really quick and I'll find the history of this video.
Okay. While you're doing that, I want to go back to what you said, because one of the things that I wrote about recently is how Donald Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. And I got that idea from Andrew Yang, actually, who I really liked when he ran for president. I would have voted for Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard over Donald Trump in 2020 if it had been one of them. But he's got, this whole concept. I played it the other day. It's like, we're fooling ourselves if we think he's the cause of all the problems. Cause of all the problems are some of the things we talked about: the middle class getting hollowed out, and wages haven't grown in 40 years, and the federal money policy and all of those things. Right? Those are the problems. And Donald Trump just hit the button, like he touched the zeitgeist, and people see him as representing that concept now. And like, if you keep trying to arrest him and you're just playing into that, man.
Yeah.
Like, part of me wonders if the Democrats don't want Donald Trump to be president the way they're acting. Like most of their moves, it causes exactly that. Oh, you got it here. Let me pull this up.
It's not actually what Jesse Waters was saying. It's listen to the interaction of Joe Biden and the
There's one simple vision hack anyone can use to improve vision.
Can you hear this?
So you can say goodbye.
Yeah, I can hear it. I hear the video.
Did you know that vision and impairment have nothing to do with your eyes?
Commercial.
The eyes are simply a camera for the part of the brain.
You can edit this out.
Here's the truth. No matter what type of glasses you wear or what eye.
I can't see it. I can only hear it.
We're a divided country. Country's been polarized for 30 years. Millions of Americans are always going to disagree.
Go to 2 minutes and 46 seconds.
No matter who it is. Right. Jesus could be president and half the country would hate Jesus.
I thought that was funny.
Something's happened where Democrats just stopped asking for our vote.
No, all the way down where the red bar is.
Yeah, I'm there. It's not letting me move.
You just went to a new video. No, you can do. See the progression bar.
Country's been polarized for 30 years.
You should be able to
millions of
there it is.
Yeah, 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Right about there.
Now people are going to realize
Biden's cut from the very same cloth. He takes everything personally and loses his temper when voters ask him direct questions. Instead of listening and persuading, Biden snaps.
Yeah.
Wait. Take your AR-14s. A lot of guys want it. I'm not worried. So much.
A voter asked Joe Biden why he was attacking the Second Amendment, and Joe Biden said
So he called him a horse's ass? What happened?
He called. So the guy says, "Hey man, you're taking our guns away," and he goes, "You're a horse's ass." Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he goes, "We're there," and then Joe Biden somehow says, "They're taking away your AR-15s," and it's like, "Who? You're the president." Okay. Yeah. And then he says, "Hey man, you're working for me, right?" And he goes, "I'm not working for you." And then he calls him some other names, and it's like, this is who I see. This is who I think Joe Biden.
Yeah,
is.
I agree. Like,
or the disease, right?
Yeah,
that he has no frontal lobe anymore.
There's been more than one report I've read where he's a complete asshole in, like behind closed doors, not in front of
the book, man.
Yeah. And, demented people often have problems with quick to anger sort of issues. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it makes sense. And yeah, I think his whole persona is a bunch of, Scranton Joe, just the same old regular guy. Meanwhile, he's been in Congress for 50 years. He's got a net worth of $10 million. How did he do that on a $150,000 salary? He's so inside baseball. And I made this point too. Like, if you want to pick someone that are the most, are the best examples of inside Washington people, it's Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's who they are running over and over and over again. Yeah. And as George Carlin would say, it's all bullshit and it's all bad for you.
I hope I hope the Gates revolution takes.
I want to tell you something. I never got to this. I'm not convinced he's on the up and up. I agree almost everything he said. I'm like, yeah, boy. And I wrote two things about it. I wrote a piece last week about.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
And then I wrote a thing after McCarthy was out about why he should be out, even though it might not be fair. But I'm not convinced that it isn't just inside baseball. I want to get rid of this turkey because he hasn't done what I want him to do, and I have a good story to tell. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced he's just this altruistic guy trying to do right. I've heard some things. So, yeah, I like you said, what he said was brilliant. 100%. Let's do it. And again, next speaker in, they don't get it done. Out. Next one. I'm totally down for that. I just saying the jury's still out for me on who Matt Gaetz is and if he really has our interest in mind or if it's more just his own career he's leveraging.
Yeah, he's got the talking points down. Yeah. You're right. I don't know. I honestly, but there's the other eight. Some of the.
I guess you could say that about anybody too, right? At some point,
I was about to say, listen. There's not a single senator that was talking about this, and not a single one of them or congressman that's actually acted on it like this. Yeah. So at least he's had enough conviction. Now, you want to say
100%.
Did he have something personal against him? Maybe, but it sure as shit sounded like McConnell baited him into it.
McCarthy,
McCarthy baited him into it. He goes, he threatened it. He didn't like the actions, and McCarthy goes, "What are you going to do about it?" And he does it. It's like, what did you expect that was going to happen?
So McCarthy over the weekend, between the point when, shit was hitting the fan, and the vote, which happened Monday or Tuesday the next week. Over the weekend, McCarthy was on all the shows. He dared Matt Gaetz to put in the motion to vacate. And then on another program, he blamed Democrats for all the problems. And there was even a reporting at CBS that said Democrats heard that and said, forget it. I'm not working with this guy anymore. So like over the week, to me, Kevin McCarthy's, tragic flaw is hubris. He's so freaking conceited. He thinks he hung the moon, that he thinks he can just go on TV when his job's in jeopardy and shit on everybody that is going to vote on Tuesday about his job and get away with it. And so, yeah, he's his own worst enemy, and good riddance, man. Like, who cares?
I liked him. I thought his approaches seemed like they were balanced. Like he said all the right things. He didn't knee jerk a lot of times. He was like,
that's what everybody does. To your point earlier, that's what everybody.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, like, I liked his due process approach, which not everybody does, right? Like the Democrats sure shit didn't do it in the prior 4 years, where they were just hanging out all the committee members and doing all these unrighteous things. And McCarthy didn't do that, right? He at least explained his position. He did hang out some Democrats, but those Democrats were in high power positions that they shouldn't have been, right? At least that's the message I heard. Even the approach to Hunter Biden and the whole scandals that are going on there, he at least said, we're going to do due process. We're going to find this stuff out. It's pretty obvious. We're going to do the inquiry now to get more power to subpoena and do these things. It didn't move at the pace that Gaetz wanted, but he was still following a nice path that just didn't say we're doing this just to wreck somebody, because he knows the political, if they don't get him, if they don't make that tie to Joe, then all this is useless. And here's the funny thing. There's so much there from circumstantial. They would have gotten it, and they were going to get it. So just let them follow this process. It's going to take time. And so it's like, so I kind of liked him from that perspective. I don't know enough about all the and you got to interworks. You got to work on both sides to get things passed, right? You do. Like, there's a reality to that. But the things that Gaetz were complaining about, I'm like, if he really wasn't doing those things, if he wasn't doing single bill appropriations, which I thought they were, that's the weird part about it, because I thought they passed 2 single bills. I thought they did 2, but they didn't do enough. They also, took 6 weeks off. They know that the deadline's coming up and they take 6 weeks off. It's like, fuck you guys. We all work every day. Why aren't you guys working to pass a budget finally?
You're right.
And so
they passed 2 out of committee, but they weren't voted on by the full Congress. And
no, that's what I'm saying. Out of committee. They did a committee. Yeah. Not full Congress. I meant committee on their side, right? Yeah. So, but at least they were starting in the right direction.
I think if he really wanted to do it, they would have done it. You know what I mean?
I agree. They could have sat down and done at least 6 of them or 10 of them. Instead, they did 2, took 6 weeks off, patted themselves on the back, and Gaetz is going, that's not good enough, man. And plus, he said 72 hours. Like, everything he said, I'm like, I really hope that the next speaker a speaker listens and says, this is what the American people agree with.
Yeah,
I 100% agree with that.
And again, it goes back to, for me, an anti-democratic process, right? Like, when you don't do the appropriations bills and you do a continuing resolution, and then you end up with an omnibus, which is everything, just one bill for all the spending, the democratic process, the Republican process, if you will, the due process of Congress having all of their representatives in committees, doing the investigations, the inquiries into how we should spend this money and on what and where, and all of those people are involved. And then suddenly they're not. It's like 5 or 6 leaders from each party deciding what goes in the bills. And that is very oligarchic. It's basically those guys run the whole place. And it's been going on for years. It's the way it runs. It's what Nancy Pelosi basically put in place more than anyone, although it's gone on for longer than her term. But it becomes this, you either vote for this massive bill or you don't, and you get no other input. So, and like, by the way, point of having representatives there, if they just have to vote for this slop, or else there's no government. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's totally, it's destructive. So
it's destructive. And then also Nancy, they go, she did all this great stuff with the same margin, but she also lined everybody's pockets, just like she was doing. And then you pass this omnibus, and they all get their money to then pass back to their lobbyists and through contracts. That again, they get them reelected. It's that 6th cycle. And it's like it's also going to happen again with Ukraine, right? Did you know that Clinton's started a Ukraine fund, kind of like they did with Haiti?
It's the second.
Now what's going to happen is those dollars, I guarantee you, the dollars that we're sending to Ukraine are going to wind up in the fund of the Clintons that go back into funding, all the political nonsense that's happening.
So let's end on that. That's the most ironic thing ever, is the Biden crime family influence peddling scheme pales in size and shape
to the
exact same scheme run by the Clintons called the Clinton Global Initiative.
I totally agree. They just didn't have a moron son who was hooked up on cocaine who left his laptop.
They are dozens of millionaires, these Clintons, by doing the exact damn thing. And Ukraine is the second most corrupt nation in Europe. There's absolutely no accountability. Like, we're not auditing or accounting for any of the money that goes over there.
So sick.
Reports
have been
that they're paying pensions.
Dude, it's so sick.
They're paying Ukrainian pensions. They're paying for small businesses to stay open with our money. It's so sickening.
It's so sick.
And then you get called a Putin apologist if you say such a thing.
I know.
And my line is always, just because I criticize the church doesn't mean I worship the devil.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's more than one opinion here between Putin and Hillary Clinton. You know what I mean? So,
by the way, the only difference between Hillary and Hunter, because they both had laptops, they both had emails. One was smart enough to destroy it, the other one wasn't.
And that was under subpoena. Her laptop was subpoenaed by Congress, and they walked outside and they put the bleach on it and they smashed it up and they did all the fucking shit, and it's gone. And
and Hunter didn't get a chance to do it.
That is why the Clintons are the best politicians that have ever lived, because they get away with absolutely everything.
It's so
or the
sick.
worst politicians that ever lived, depending on your...
Yeah, depending on how you look at it. Probably both. They're the best ever.
Dude, this has been so much fun. Let's do this on a regular basis, but I got to run. It's been great.
For sure, man. This has been great.
Well, this is brought to you by The Country. If you like this show, please visit us at www.thecountry.news. Go ahead and become a premium subscriber. We depend on you guys. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. See you.
I want to live like a Kennedy.